The Durham report came out. Many of you heard about the details. It effectively confirms that there was a soft coup from the intelligence agencies against a sitting president. And man, does it rock my confidence in this country, because many of these people are not going to be held to account. But we do have new developments. Rep. Anna Paulina Luna has filed for the expulsion of Adam Schiff, who lied repeatedly about evidence and proof that the Trump family was involved in some kind of conspiracy to subvert this United States. So I'm really excited to see that breaking news, and we're going to be talking a lot about this because we've got Donald Trump Jr. hanging out with us. Normally I do the joining us later, but I just want to jump straight into it because I think this is going to be the bulk of the conversation, what's currently happening. We do have a bunch of other news stories too, so we'll just go right into it. Before we get started, my friends, head over to castbrew.com. To support our work. Cast Brew is our coffee brand and company. We're using, this company is going to be a cultural hub. We're hoping to launch a bunch of coffee shops all over the country. That's our dream. We've got one currently in the works. It's ambitious, but we're hoping to get there. With your support by buying Cast Brew coffee at castbrew.com, we will make this happen. We've invested heavily in this so far. We're talking I probably shouldn't say it, but I think we're near like $500,000 invested in launching this program already, because I really do think getting people in various cities to sit together for a cup of coffee is going to give us a cultural foothold in a lot of locations. So castbrew.com, you can pick up your Rise with Roberto Jr. breakfast blend, only whole bean available, but we do have the Cast Brew Coffee Club. Sign up today and you'll get 3 bags every single month. Also, don't forget, here's the big one. Go to timcast.com, click join us, become a member. Then you'll get access to our private Discord server, where not only will you be hanging out with like-minded individuals, but if you're a member at $10 for at least 6 months, you can submit questions and call into our uncensored after show. And if you sign up for at least $25 right now, you will get instant access to the VIP chat where you can submit questions. And at about 10 p.m. tonight, we're going to go to the uncensored members only show at timcast.com, where we will take your calls so you can talk to all of us here at Timcast, including our guests, which I think many people are really excited to. There's a lot of questions around what happened with the Durham report. So smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. As I already mentioned, joining us tonight to talk about this is the man himself, Donald Trump Jr.
What's going on, guys? How you doing?
I think everybody knows who you are. Do you want to do a quick intro, I suppose?
Donald Trump Jr.
There you go. All right. Thanks for hanging out. This should be fun.
Good to be with you, man.
You're the, even before the show, we're talking about your family being framed by politicians, by intelligence agencies for being traitors and spies is the most, it's bigger than Watergate. It's insane.
Like significantly. And when you look at the amount of people that were involved, the resources that took place to create this thing, the level of people, Tim, that knew, and we're all in on it, and we're just fine with that. I mean, it's not just, Comey as the director of the CIA, but Obama knew, and Biden knew, and Hillary knew, and everyone knew.
And they all knew they were
lying. And it didn't matter. Yeah, well, that's the Anna Paulina stuff's incredible because, Adam Schiff, I remember this, and I take it pretty personally because I was the guy that they said, I'm going to go to jail for life. They were going to try me for treason, also a crime punishable by death. Minor details for me at this point. It's just another Tuesday. But, that guy was on TV every day saying he had seen the evidence. He had it. I was going to jail for life. And you're sitting there being like, I don't even understand what's going on. And let alone that this is happening. But they could do that the media could so gleefully run with it as though it's the gospel without actually anything there.
They won awards for it.
Well, that's the interesting one. I think my father's actually suing some of them. I think it's the Pulitzer Committee because, the Washington Post, I think the New York Times, they won Pulitzer Prizes for the journalism surrounding Russia. But
that's unfair.
None of it actually happened.
No, I'm sorry. That's unfair. You called it journalism.
I apologize. The propaganda around Russia. Well, that's honestly at this point, that's what they are. You can see that. You can see. The joy they take when someone who's actually a dissenting voice, like a Tucker Carlson, comes off the air. You could see it when, I guess it was Jake Tapper's voice was cracking last week after the CNN town hall because, even with weeks of preparation to try to take out Donald Trump, it didn't work out quite like they had planned. And, what's really interesting, perhaps, Tim, just seeing the Durham report, the just total blackout on mainstream media. No one's even talking about it. It's like it didn't even happen. It's like we're just going to not even talk about it because if it's not good for the narrative, not only will we not cover it a little bit, we won't even acknowledge it. The democracy folks, we heard a lot of screaming about democracy and Trump's the greatest threat to democracy. They're awfully silent because this feels like an actual threat to democracy, and yet I don't hear anyone bitching about it.
So we'll do it. So this is going to be fun. Thanks
Sweet.
for joining us. I'm very excited. It's an honor and a privilege, sir. We've got Seamus Coughlin.
Yeah, by the way, we were complaining about it all day yesterday. I was complaining about it on my podcast, which is called Shamer, by the way. Y'all can check that out on Rumble. My name's Seamus Coughlin. I create cartoons on a YouTube channel called Freedom Tunes. We're going to be releasing a cartoon tomorrow that I think y'all are going to enjoy. If you want to go check that out and subscribe. And we have a website, freedomtunes.com. If you want to support what we're doing, you can become a member there. Thank you.
We've got Hannah Claire Brimelow hanging out.
Yeah, hi, I'm Hannah Claire Brimelow. I'm a writer for Timcast.com. You should ignore Seamus's podcast and go to Timcast.com and click on the read tab.
I think you should just go check out my Rumble podcast, by the way.
Hey,
We're going to do shameless plugs. I'm a Trump.
my podcast first.
I am the master of shameless plugs. It's genetic.
5 minutes in, we're already pulling out the Trump last name.
You can't turn that crap off if you have those genes, okay? Just relax, okay? So I got to do that. And I don't do that often, but I got to, I got to play the Trump card if we're all doing gratuitous plugs.
Quite frankly, Shamer is the greatest podcast.
I let it go. I let it go at first. I didn't even include it in my intro, but then if everyone else is plugging, I'm going to plug.
That's why we're here, baby.
What's your show?
I just have the Triggered podcast on Rumble where do much of the same. It's a long form version of a lot of the rants that people have been watching me do on social for a while, and had some fun with that. Just enjoy the platform and being able to say whatever I want, and
it's awesome.
And I do.
Unlike you two.
What time do you stream?
I go 6 o'clock Mondays and Thursdays.
Oh, nice. I do Tuesdays and Thursdays at 6 o'clock. So on Thursdays, you guys are tuning into mine.
All right, and then we got Serge pressing all the buttons.
Yeah, today is going to be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, should be good.
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah.
Let's go. We've been talking about this for a little while.
We had you call in.
Yeah, and I called in a couple weeks ago, and that was cool and sort of unexpected. Alex was like, "Hey, you want to call in?" I was like, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah. And he's like, "I'm just gonna call him on the phone." I was like, "Okay, guys."
Yeah.
But then you ended up joining through the Discord, and I want to jump to the story, but I just have to say. It was a beautiful moment when you just yelled, "I am a Trump."
Well, listen, I'm not going to be outplugged. You know what I mean?
My Seamus Coughlin.
Look, hey, I did beat you to it. I got to the plugs first.
I didn't even mention it in my intro. I'm like, I'm just going to let it slide. I'm not going to do that. But if everyone else is plugging, I'm plugging. You know?
Let's jump into this story and go right to it. We got this from DC Drano on Twitter. Check this out. Breaking news. GOP Rep. Anna Paulina Luna submits House resolution to expel Rep. Adam Schiff from Congress in light of Durham report findings showing his involvement with illegal spying on U.S. president. Mm-hmm. It's a resolution that says resolved that pursuant to Article 1, Section 5, Clause 2 of the Constitution of the United States, Representative Adam Schiff be, and he hereby is, expelled from the House of Representatives. Now, I'm not convinced they'll actually do it.
No, unfortunately
They should do it. Mm-hmm. And outside of the spying, I do want to mention that he published the private information of an American journalist, once again in an attempt to smear your family. Mm-hmm. Yep. But let's jump into this.
Well, there's a lot more to it. I mean, the whole thing. I remember, I've done 50 hours of testimony before the various committees. House Intelligence, Senate Intelligence twice, House Judiciary. And when he was on House Intelligence and doing that, I was in front of that committee, and I got out. It was like I got in at like 9 a.m., I think I got out at 7 p.m., 7:30, and I go, and I was like, okay, guys, what happened today? And I'm looking at my Twitter at 7:30 at night, and it's like literally every bathroom break, there was a leak. Literally, like, this is what's going on in the room, and he's just out there, and it has to be him, right? Because, like, you've never met someone, the guy's never met a camera he didn't love, and they more than, gleefully carry his nonsense. And I was just like, oh my God, like, my lawyers weren't allowed to take their phones into the room, but he can go leak to people from the Intelligence Committee. I mean, these people shouldn't have classified, documentation. It's no different than like Swalwell, who was sleeping with a Chinese spy. It's perfectly natural to leave him on the Intelligence Committee. I'm like, I don't understand. But, that was going on. I was part of 3 of the big, the walls are closing in bombshells. You heard many of those, but 3 of the big ones were me. And one of them was that I had somehow gotten the Julian Assange emails or information, that Clinton emails before. But the reality is, like, some random dude, like, DM'd him to me, I think it was, or emailed him to me, and just literally, like, spamming, like, possible Trump email accounts, and, like, it ended up in my inbox, and I'm looking, and I'm like, well, I didn't have these things before they came out, but they took, it was, like, 14, right? Like, August 14th, or whatever the date was, right? They just deleted the 1 in the email. So it looked like I had it on August 4th.
Wow.
It was released on, like, August 8th, or August 10th, but you delete the 1 from 14, it looked like I had it 4 days before the rest of the world, not 6 days after the rest of the world. Because you get a lot of that spam. It was just totally, like, that was a gotcha moment. it's known now because we have the emails that we handed over and we have the emails they used in evidence, and it's like, no, there's not even a correction. There's not even a correction. It's like it's still real. And so it was just that constant lies. My Time magazine cover was truly special.
So this is Vox.com from
God.
2017. It says red-handed. Yep. Time's latest cover captures how bad things are for Donald Trump. The Russia scandal hits home by David von, is it Drell? However you pronounce it. And
who cares?
I think at this point, it's now been about 6 years since this Time magazine cover. If red-handed what? Nothing happened. It was all nonsense.
Yeah, the whole thing was a lie. But it didn't. Yeah. But again, that didn't matter. And that's the thing. I mean, even then, for us and for me, it's like, well, there must be something to it. I mean, the FBI is saying these things. The CIA, they're. Maybe
you believe they're honorable institutions on some level.
I believe that. I have friends in law enforcement, and I now make the distinction sort of between the door kickers and the bureaucrats, right? The door kickers, like, they come up to me all the time. It's like, I can't believe what's going on. It's disgusting. And but they also know if they say anything, they're fired or they'll never get promoted, just like they're doing in the military. If you don't take the vax times 12, like, you're no longer a fighter pilot. We'll just put someone else who checks a bunch of boxes. I got to be careful.
Sounds a bit cowardly.
It is, but that's unfortunately now the game. Again, no one's talking about this story right now. It's kind of a big deal. I mean, Watergate's a big deal. They still talk about Watergate as being a big deal. The people who worked on Watergate, they haven't really done much since then, but they still hold this legendary status for some reason. And they've been commenting. Bob Woodward and others have been commenting on this story for 6 years as though they're the foremost authority on it. Now it's all nonsense.
Yeah.
But like, where's like we got this wrong? Where's the mea culpa? Like, it doesn't even matter. Like,
that's never coming.
No, of course it's never coming, because journalism is dead, and that's why it's so important what you guys do and what I try to do. I'm sure what you do as well.
I am a journalist.
On Tuesdays and Thursdays at 6 p.m.
I appreciate it, Shamer.
You're welcome. We're all sort of in this together, because the reality is, like, we're taking on media and some of these things that I do actually genuinely believe were once noble institutions, but like, man, it's gone downhill quick.
Here's the thing.
It's evil. These people are. Look, I think that when your dad gets reelected, we need an AG who is going to launch criminal probes. I'm not saying every journalist, I'm not saying every Democrat, I'm not saying every member of the intelligence agency or federal law enforcement are criminals. I'm saying it is clear that there was an attempt, a seditious conspiracy. Yeah. Now, what they're trying to, I'll phrase it this way. Right now, what do we know? There's something called the standalone complex. Are you familiar with the term?
I've heard of the term. I'm not.
I think it originates from Ghost in the Shell. It's a manga and anime. But the idea is when a bunch of people all do something in a way that looks like a conspiracy, like if there's a crowd of people and all of a sudden everybody stands up, you might think it was coordinated, but it's not.
Yeah.
That's what we can say happened right now. But I will say this. All of these people who pushed the lies, Hillary Clinton making these false claims, the FBI then chasing after evidence that was not correct, the manipulation of evidence to further FISA warrants, suggests probable cause that there was a seditious conspiracy.
Correct.
At the bare minimum, I am hoping that we actually see a real AG get in when your dad gets reelected, and he just says, we're going to start filing some criminal investigations, likely some criminal indictments, and then these people end up getting charged. I think Adam Schiff is criminally culpable for going on TV over and over again, trying to subvert this country and sow distrust in our institutions.
Well, and so just reverse it, right? Reverse the parties for a second. If Republicans did what Adam Schiff did, they'd be in the gulags right now. I mean, someone would be in Gitmo. I use, I don't want to necessarily talk about myself that way the whole time, but like, if I was Hunter Biden,
right,
like, they wouldn't be removing the team at the IRS to hand it over to the DOJ because they had a whistleblower. That whistleblower would be beyond reproach. If I was on video, I mean, if I did one of the hundreds of degenerate things, like, it would be disqualifying, not just for me, but for my father, but for him, it's okay. Mm-hmm. Millions of dollars, the shell entities that were magically formed to do business the second Joe Biden had authority to do, only in the countries that Joe Biden had any kind of authority where he could manipulate an outcome. Like, magically, these people are all of a sudden business people. I mean, we got in trouble for building buildings when I think there's a pretty solid record that our family's been building buildings for 60 years. It's that, the two-tiered levels and two-tier system of justice right now that's just so flagrant. It's so in your face. even those who may hate Trump or me or whatever, like I don't think that anyone can objectively look at it. Maybe they won't say it in polite company, but when they're sitting there by themselves at night being like, okay, well, there's a lot of BS here.
Is when your dad gets reelected? I don't know if you speak for him, and I do think there's something silly of being like Trump Jr. is here. Let me ask you what your dad thinks.
Yeah, no, I don't, because a lot of candidly, there's so much every day. Like I couldn't keep up with the insanity to begin with. Right, there's not enough time in the.
I'm just hoping that he fires everybody.
Yeah,
classic Trump. You're fired.
Little Cobra.
To all the bureaucrats. I hope that a real AG comes in and says this country needs a fresh start. This corruption's got to go.
Yeah, well, listen, I do know this, and talking to him. I mean, coming in as an outsider was great, but you also have the pitfalls of that, which is, again, you can't fathom that. Honestly, even like a Democrat politician at the time. Now we're everything's in hindsight, right? So it feels like we're so much like, obviously, Wuhan lab leak, right? Like, of course it was like. Now I always believed that was the point of origin, but did we really think our health officials would literally subvert the health of the American people? They would, like, we know that now, but at the time, you know what I mean? One of the things they gave my father a lot of stuff over January 6th. I don't know what I can say on YouTube or not, but I don't think it's controversial. But why didn't he pardon people? Well, in the 7 days between that and like. We didn't know. They didn't release any information. We were told it was a violent this. We weren't shown any video. 2 years later, we finally get the videos because Republicans are able to release that, but there's a reason they controlled that information. You can see that happen then, but in that period of time, you actually didn't know much.
I actually think if we look at the CNN debate that your dad had with Caitlin Collins, It was he answered rather well. She said, why did you wait 3 hours to say, no violence? And he pulls out the tweets and he's like, half an hour after they breached, I said, no violence, no violations.
Yeah.
And then, are you going to pardon people? And he said, I'll take a look at it. Some people obviously did bad things and they shouldn't be pardoned. He's completely right.
Yeah, no one believes you should be able to go punch a cop randomly. But like if you're getting a tour through the Capitol, but it's a little different, right?
The police opened the door for you and let you in. Why are you being criminally charged?
The video, the sound bites that you hear from that, I mean, I think it demands much further investigation. And honestly, the bigger thing is, frankly, almost regardless of even if you did punch a cop, I think you're still entitled to due process.
Yeah.
And that's the problem that seems to be totally missing. Meaning, due process doesn't mean we put you in jail for 2 years or maybe we'll deal with it someday.
Yep.
And, even with all of this stuff going on, even with all the conspiracy theories that have come true, even with everything that we now know, they want to cast a wider net around January 6th. I'm like, really? Like, that's what you're going to look into? Not people who have real power and influence in government manipulating, whether it's, and I think it's not election interference, but this was designed to hurt Trump. It made midterms harder. Those of us who, I've become a junkie at this. At the time, I probably wasn't, right? We build buildings. That's what we did. Like, I was into it. I was always reasonably political, but not like I am now. So, you're sitting there, the average person trying to put food on their table, and they're listening to 5 minutes of news a day. It's like, well, okay, there must be something to it. I thought that. And I was a target. I was probably the number 2 target of them after my father.
Well, so let me ask you, what was I suppose it's a 2-part question. What was the first time you realized they were lying, like they were coming after you, like something was happening, and how did you feel? Like, it is back 2017 or something?
It's interesting. I don't actually remember. I mean, you start seeing it and you're like, wait a second. Like,
they accusing me of what?
That's pretty obvious. And again, initially, even with this stuff, I was like, well, yeah, I may, who the hell knows, right? They get you that way a lot, right? There's, some, one of the alt-right characters, they make it seem like that's half the country. It's nonsense, right? There's 7 of them out there that, but they're like, they got a selfie with Don Jr. Like, I took 1,700 selfies that day. Like, I don't know who that person is, but it's like, we're best friends, and the media will run with that. So, it's like, well, I don't know, maybe someone was doing something bad, and who knows, maybe they have a picture with me because I took a click line.
Because you're a public figure.
I took 150 pictures in a 5-minute period. It doesn't mean I actually know the person. It doesn't mean I could even tell you when that happened because I was so swamped with it. But so you're like, well, maybe peripherally there was something going on. I know I didn't do anything, but then you start seeing it further. And you start realizing, I was like, wait a minute, like, I'm actually the red-handed on the cover of Time magazine and Schiff's on TV every day lying about it. I'm like, wait a second. And again, then for better or worse, I guess, I have a little bit of the Trump gene, and that kicked in, and I was like, I'm not running from this. I'm just going to engage. And my lawyers, man, my lawyers were not in love with me for a while when all that stuff happened. Like the first time when that stuff happened, like I got on TV that night and they're like, you can't get on TV. Like anything you say. I was like, dude, I'm not going to be called a traitor and take it. I don't care if this gets me into trouble telling the truth and being open. And I did it. I put out the DMs, like I guess the DMs from WikiLeaks and Assange that I was like, here it is. I'm not, what am I supposed to do? I opened a DM that someone sent me like that. I don't know. Like, am I supposed to? And by the way, I also didn't I wouldn't have even thought about these things necessarily at the time, right? Like, it's just a different mindset. Now it's like, okay, like what's the setup? What's the angle? I think about these things now. At the time, I certainly didn't. But I realize how much more nefarious it is.
But I agree with you. I mean, it's the most frustrating thing in the world when you have lawyers being like, you can't defend yourself.
Yeah, and they did. And I just ignored them. And for 2 years, they're like, you're going to get your... And finally, they came up to me like, they go, you were right. I go, what do you mean? They're like, you know what? If you would have curled up in the corner over there and, sucked your thumb crying for mommy, like, it would have meant nothing. It would have been worse. It would have actually been worse, right? Yep. It's the capitulation. You see that with like cancel culture, right? The second, like, okay, I'm sorry. Oh, the sorry.
Yep, blood in the water.
There's no honor in it, right? There's no, if you're trying to do the right thing, that's actually your admission of guilt to them. Because it doesn't have to be real to begin with, right? The accusation can be total BS, but if they say it enough, they put it on the cover of Time magazine, there must be some truth to it. You then try to be, okay, let's just settle it down. I'm going to apologize. No. That's the first mistake because now they got you because you've admitted that you actually were wrong and there's no coming back from it. They're not dealing, honorably. It's not an arm's length, like, let's do the right thing.
Exactly. And this is something that conservatives and Republicans, both as individual citizens and political leaders, have really failed at for such a very long time. Left-wingers will come at you and say, you're a racist when you're trying to have a discussion on something like healthcare, welfare policy, border
Basic
security, basic math, somewhere where it's completely irrelevant. And so often Republicans would respond to that, not by saying, all right, I'm going to completely disregard that non sequitur and continue the conversation about something of substance that we were actually discussing. They would go, no, I'm not racist. All of my best friends are black. I've never done anything that would ever offend anyone. Let me play by your rules. And then your dad comes around and do American politics. And when these people start asking him these ridiculous questions and framing things in a ridiculous way, he's like, shut up, you stupid. And it's beautiful.
The Rosie O'Donnell thing was exactly what you're talking about.
Only but I think, Rosie O'Donnell.
But I think that's
Everyone's
really important.
Screaming and cheering.
Well,
that was amazing. Yeah. I was there, and that was like, I'm just like, that was actually when I was like, oh, he's going to win this thing. It was interesting.
When he called Rosie O'Donnell a fat pig, that was it. I knew.
It wasn't even when he did it. It was the reaction of the crowd. It's interesting. Like, the brash billionaire from New York City that lives in gilded Trump Tower. It's like, he still had that connection with regular people, and it was from being on construction sites a lot. Like, he didn't lock himself in an office all the time and like listen to the executives. He'd walk a construction site and talk with a guy that's putting up sheetrock. And it's like, well, do you ever think about this? This is how to get a little bit more ceiling height or whatever. And like, so he always had those kind of connections with those guys, and he just got it. And that's when I realized just how much he got it. And it was the reaction from those people. Just when he did his opening speech, June 16th, 2015, I only remember because it's my daughter's birthday, no one said anything about the Mexican rapist comments because, of course, that's going on right now. We see that at levels like, we've actually never seen before at the border of, the
Cartels,
amount of
coyotes, gangs.
Yeah, all of that stuff. Like, but everyone thinks that like that flared up that day. It wasn't. It was like 2 weeks later when like he actually started gaining and all of a sudden like, oh my God, he could win. Mm-hmm. That's when it became racist because everyone knew it was real. So everyone thinks that it was like, that was the reaction to the speech. No. It was the reaction to the success of everything that he was doing about 2 weeks later when the outrage cycle started and all of a sudden it became racist as opposed to just factually
and if they could
accurate.
tar him with their number one slur, he's a racist,
Correct.
then perhaps that would undercut his success.
And part of what was so hilarious about that is during Trump's campaign, they overused the word racism so much they had to move on to a new phrase. Right in 2016, after he got elected, they started calling everything white supremacist because the word racist didn't mean anything anymore.
Did you guys see the stats last week? It was like Washington Post and New York Times, like 700% and 1,000% respectively since like 20.
Yes.
The use of the word, it's just because it's just clickbait. And listen, I think social media is part of that, right? Like, and I'm not going to pretend I'm not guilty of some of these things, but like, everything's to get that click and you got to make it a little bit more inflammatory. Like the problem with it is like now, do I believe that racism still exists? Sure. I just don't think it's the cause of and solution for all of life's problems. Like it's not I travel the country. I haven't experienced any of it. I haven't seen it. I see tens of thousands of people a month, like all over the place. And yet there is actual racism still. But when everyone's branded a racist, when you're talking about economics or math and you're called a racist because that's like the easy button of the political left, it does a huge disservice to those who are actually afflicted by that. And that's not everyone. And if
I think what we're talking about right now, in more ways than just the racism issue, like every grievance they've screamed for 7 years at the top of their lungs, it's just falling on deaf ears at this point, and people are tired of it.
Correct. Which does a disservice to the small fraction of people who are actually genuinely afflicted. You know what I mean? Or because you now when I get called, I don't even respond. Like people are like they said you're a racist. They tried doing it to my brother last week. He's an anti-Semite. It's like that's going to make Thanksgiving really awkward with my sister who's Orthodox Jewish. Like I'm like what are you talking about? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like they can just say it. Well, you were near someone who once said this. I'm like, did I say it? Like.
It's just, you disregard these people at this point, I suppose. When someone comes up to me and says something nonsensical, I'll be like, you're not a serious person.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if they had any genuine concern for the groups of people for whom they claim to stand and who they claim to defend, then they would be really careful about the bombastic claims that they made in the media to everyone about groups of people that they didn't like or politicians they didn't like, because all they've done is discredit themselves over the past several years. So even if they were fighting for these supposedly marginalized groups, well, who would believe them when they offered up a solution anyway?
You would, yeah. I mean, you made the point about serious people. You're right, but like, who at this point, who is a serious person when it comes to this stuff? Because like they're all doing it, right? It's not like there's a couple guys that are beyond reproach. Like, the reality is, and maybe look, I think it's why they were so gleeful about Tucker, because he did take on both sides. He called out Republican establishment. You saw the thing that was so frustrating for me as someone who's super anti this insane war in Ukraine and just funding it in perpetuity to let people die. I love my father's answer on CNN Town Hall, but was like, the Republicans spoke to Politico or The Hill or some other leftist thing on condition of anonymity. Now that Tucker Carlson's no longer on Fox, we can gleefully continue to perpetuate the war in Ukraine without fear of reprisal from. You're a Republican senator. You were elected to do this. Despite what Mitch McConnell says when he's like, Republicans, it's their number one issue. Like, Mitch, I've spent a lot more time with real Republicans, like on the ground, and it's not a top 10 issue for almost any of them. But they're gleeful that they can continue to support an unpopular war with the people that elected them, because no one's going to actually be there calling them out because the uni party or it's insane.
I think one of the things they're very scared of when your dad was on with debating Caitlin Collins, he said he would end the war in Ukraine in a day. And we had been talking about that about a week or two before. And I said the same thing. I think he gets in there and he shuts the whole thing down. The issue is, they don't want the war to stop.
Nope.
The war's profit.
You know how much money they're making? Again, it's 130 million. The Pentagon misplaced 220 billion, right? Like, if you miss $6 on your taxes, right? They want to go after you if you over a $600 Venmo transaction, $601. The IRS is going to audit you with their 87,000 new agents. But the Pentagon can misplace $220 billion, and no one's even like, huh? I wonder where it went. It's just like, oh yeah, you know how much money that is? But
if they misplaced it, they had a good reason. You just have to trust
them. Because I'm saying the reality is whatever the 130 is that we've publicly funded, we also didn't think, I did, because I just don't believe anything they say, but the average person also didn't believe that we had boots on the ground in Ukraine either, because it wasn't congressionally approved, and it certainly wouldn't be popular with the American people who, until Ukraine sort of became the new religion of the left, replacing, Lord Fauci and COVID as the religion and demigod of the left for the last few years, like, the average American is not for these wars. They're trying to drum that back up, and it's because our generals, that's their retirement plan. We get on the board of Lockheed Martin. The way to keep that job is to continue to sell missiles. You don't continue to sell missiles if you're not actually using them, because and now we're depleting our stockpiles to do that, and that's everyone's get-rich-quick scheme when they retire.
Let's talk about some contemporary politics, because I have this story from Newsweek, and it is one of the greatest headlines I've ever seen the fake news publish. John Fetterman's question at Senate hearing leaves witness speechless. And
not in the way that you think. Not in the way that Newsweek would have you believe.
And this is exactly it. They want you to believe that his question was so good so strong that the witness was like, how do I have nothing to say. Yeah. When in reality, what happened was John Fetterman didn't say anything coherent at all.
Can you play it?
Sputtering.
Can you play it? Because
how much you want to bet they didn't put it in the article?
Oh my gosh.
Almost without question.
At the top.
Here, let's go to
No, I know, but is it actually going to be in it?
They went to go to Hawaii's after there was a crash of your bank, and I couldn't believe it. So I went up on the internet, and it's like, it did happen. And that's in Fortune. The second biggest bank in U.S. history collapsed and chose to go to Hawaii.
This isn't the good part yet, though.
I've never been to Hawaii.
I don't think they're going to show it.
I think you're right. I think they're going to...
Or excuse me, crashed a bank, So given that I'm the last person, I don't have much left to ask, but I will, let me ask you this one particular question.
I think they're going there.
To put to everyone here on that. And it's an inside joke. No matter how incompetent or how greedy, the government will always bail you out when your bank crashes. I mean, everyone has to know that, right? Everyone has to realize that no matter how bad I behave, no matter how big my race is, my bonuses and everything, we will come in and bail it because we can't crash the economy, much the way SVB was argued that it was going to crash.
What did he just say?
I have no idea. I actually
that's not even the crazy part.
I did a short. That's not the crazy part because I did one. There's a minute and 10 seconds. I just did a commentary for Facebook and social on it, and I'll do it on the podcast tomorrow, I guess. But it's a minute and 10 seconds of utter insanity. And Fetterman, I've spent a lot of time on this one because I'm one of the few guys. I've been called, not a racist on John Fetterman, but I was called an ableist. Because I went after him.
Which is them admitting he's disabled, by the way.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, for those of you who don't know, that means you discriminate against those with disabilities. And I just don't think it's ever going to be popular with the American people to not expect basic cognitive function from a United States senator. This is someone who could vote to send your children to war. It's someone who's voting on trillions of dollars and he'll rubber stamp the Democrat thing. Do you have the actual quote?
Yeah, you want to play?
Yeah, play it. It's just too good.
Is it a staggering responsibility that the head of a bank could literally crash our economy? It's astonishing. That's like if you have, and they also realize is that now they have a guaranteed way to be saved. By how, so it's isn't it appropriate that this kind of control should be more stricter?
Speechless.
To prevent this kind of thing from going, or should we just go on and start bailing and sailing whoever bank, regardless of how their
rarer
conduct is?
It's like when you're trying to talk to a girl you like, you get nervous.
Well, I love how his look at the guy's like, oh, he can't respond. I'm like, because you're an imbecile.
The Republicans want to give a work requirement for SNAP. For a hungry family has to have this kind of penalties or some kinds of working required. Shouldn't you have a working requirement after we sail your bank with billions of your bank? Because they seem to be more preoccupied than SNAP. And requirements for for hungry people, but not about protecting the taxpayers, that will bail no matter whatever does about a bank to crash it.
What?
Yeah. By the way, don't forget the media. When he got elected, the media was happy to say, hey, this is a guy that could be for 2024. Now we have an imbecile in office right now, so
exactly.
Why should we hold a senator to a higher standard than the president? But
I want everybody to remember what you just heard from this man, and I want to show it what Newsweek wrote.
Yes.
Here's what Newsweek writes, quote, Republicans want a work requirement for SNAP for hungry families. Shouldn't you have a working requirement after we bail out your bank? Fetterman asked at the end of the hearing. He didn't say those words.
Those were not the words that came out of his mouth at all.
Not even a little bit those words. The Washington Post did the same thing, where the guy, I guess, did a correction. Well, yesterday I tweeted a quote provided to me by the senator's office without checking it against the video, because he gave this glowing quote that actually made sense. I don't necessarily agree with what was in it, but
it's what they wrote.
It flowed. It's what they wrote. And they're just covering it. And again, I know they'll call me an ableist once again, but I do not think it's unreasonable for the American public, the voting public, to expect basic cognitive function. This is a United States senator, guys. Like, this is not someone, and I don't think you'd let Joe Biden do it either, but like, you wouldn't let this guy drive you in an Uber car. Like,
When
certainly
Joe Biden gets lost on stage and is confused, there is something sad about it because he is so pathetic in that way.
Honestly, that's the hard part. That's why, like, it was easy to get people to hate Hillary. It's hard. No, it's hard to hate Joe Biden. Like, whether the corrupt, like, you look at him, you can't, if you're human, you can't help but feel bad for him. Because you realize he has no idea where he is.
It's the same thing with John Fetterman. He is so clearly trying to recall. I mean, a lot of officials memorize their statement that they're going to have. That's not unusual. But he is struggling so desperately to recall what he is supposed to be saying. Not just like, oh, I'm getting stage fright, I'm forgetting my lines. Like, he is not there. And in some ways, that is unnerving that there's a group of people who can see this person who's clearly sick and suffering and saying, go out there and try and,
and that's
wear
why
the suit and hit the talking points.
He's being used as a pawn because he's not hated like a Hillary was, right? Now, I'd argue that he's probably far more effective in actually delivering some of the insanity of the radical left policies because he'll sign anything you put in front of him. Because he does not know where he is, he's also incapable of reasoning about... No, but hear me out.
No, I think you're right.
Like, whoever is in charge, whether it's Obama, whether it's Susan Rice, whether it's one of these radicals, Obama felt the same way. But he just wasn't going to destroy his legacy signing this stuff in. They're happy to throw Joe under the bus because, like, what's his legacy going to be? But they're actually furthering that insanity. Do we really believe that, like, an 85-year-old Irish Catholic guy, like, the trans thing, it's the social justice cause of this generation? Like, I don't know. I don't think anyone believes that. But he'll say it. Like, I certainly don't think an Irish Catholic believes that stuff.
Well, you're certainly not allowed to. Yeah. But you're not a real Catholic if you believe you should transition kids. That's not even a question, right? That's not even a only question. Like, Catholics do not believe in transgenderism at all.
But he's also pro-abortion.
And he's also pro-abortion. Joe Biden is not a practicing Catholic, and he hasn't been for decades because he doesn't give assent to church teaching. He doesn't believe in what the Catholic Church teaches.
Seamus is a Shiite Wahhabi Catholic.
That's right.
I can see that.
According to Michael Knowles.
But I think that's like a lot of Americans. I think it's like a lot of Americans, though. A lot of Americans identify as Christian and don't, live out those practices at all. It's because in
a lot of men identify as women, I
know. They don't live out those practices either.
Listen, the reality, it seems like we can identify as a lot more than we could have a few years ago. So I'm going to give someone who's not quite 100% practicing Catholic, I'm going to give them a little bit more slack than the people who are going to force me to say some sort of pronouns that don't make any sense.
Listen.
Biden is trans Catholic. He does identify as Catholic.
Fetterman identifies as a senator. And the responses, and I know it sounds like a joke. No, this is not a joke. I'm being serious. He runs for the Senate. He is not capable of being a senator. I feel bad for him because, he always wanted this. He has a stroke. It's a horrible thing, and I feel bad. And now he still what's happening? What I'm trying to get at when I say he identifies as a senator is much in the way a leftist will go to someone and say, yes, you're exactly what you think you are. They're going to this man and being like, yeah, you're a senator. You're a senator.
Stamp it here. Yep.
When he's clearly incapable, he is not an effective senator.
But the thing, and people don't realize that, and they've been lying to people about this. They knew this about the stroke. They could have had Connor Lamb, who was a congressman, and I don't agree with a lot of his positions, but at least he's present. At least there's a candle. There's a gerbil in the hamster wheel, like moving around. Whereas it's not with him. But they said this is a guy that we can get him to win. It doesn't matter if he's capable of thought because all he has to do is rubber stamp what Chuck Schumer says. And it also talks about the issues with elections. Now I won't talk about elections now. Maybe we'll do it in the later hour because. And again, I won't say anything. But like, do we really think that like the people of Pennsylvania were shown this man? And like, oh yeah, that's my guy. But listen, or do we think there was a ballot harvesting operation and
there's that joke from, I think, what's the guy's name? Was it John Dye? I hope I'm not getting his name wrong. He said, how come if Lizzo is so beautiful, how come women get so mad when I say you look like Lizzo?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's because
she's healthy.
They're lying, right? So this is what I mean. The same people who are going to Lizzo and saying, oh, you're so beautiful, are the people going to John Fetterman and being like, you're a great senator.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
They're not being honest with us because they're putting the feelings of the individual who wishes they were healthy, beautiful, or a senator in front of the actual responsibilities of a person in that position.
Correct. Yeah, and this is one of the very sad paradigm shifts that is leading to the slow death of the West. What people used to do is they would encourage you when you were young to try to figure out what you could give to the world? What is your vocation? What are you meant for? What can you provide to others? And then it was shifted towards, what can you do for yourself? How can you prove that you're impressive? How can you be in a position that's comfortable for you? And so what we end up with is a situation where you have someone who is either in steep cognitive decline, as Joe Biden is, but wanted to be the president, or his handlers wanted him to be the president, and so it's mean to tell him he can't, or someone like John Fetterman, who is quite clearly cognitively impaired, but who wants to be a senator, and so no one around him was willing to say, hey, you actually can't do that job.
I don't even know that he wants it.
I don't know that he wants it
to be
either.
fair, then let me add a caveat.
I think he was bullied into it. They're like, this is our best chance, and now you're going to sit there for 6 years and get through it. You don't really have to show up. You can wear shorts on the floor of the Senate and your hoodie.
We
sweatshirt.
love your sneakers.
Again,
you look great.
I'm not one that overdresses. It's not my but I don't know. There's still a respect for that institution, and they don't care about that anymore. That's all gone.
Well, let me just add one caveat to what I'm saying then. You could very much be right that they bullied him into this. They thought he'd be someone who could represent their interests well, and I think that's likely the case even with somebody like Joe Biden. But the American people should be able to see, hey, the purpose of a job isn't to make someone feel special for having that job. The purpose of a job is to provide something to society. This man cannot provide to us as the people what a senator is supposed to provide because he's clearly disabled, right? He's just not meant for that position. There's nothing wrong with being disabled. It doesn't make you a bad person. There's nothing wrong in the moral sense, right? You're not less valuable as a person, but it does mean there are certain jobs that aren't open to you because they require a high degree of competence.
Yeah, I think what you're...
But that's mean.
I think
that's
you're right.
mean to say.
I think that's true.
Would you let him perform brain surgery on you? Would you let,
There are
I'd
things
end
that
up
he
like
can't
him.
do. There are things that he can't do because he is cognitively impaired. But I think we're seeing this happen with Joe Biden, with Fetterman, and we're seeing it with Dianne Feinstein in Congress.
Yeah.
She
By the
is
way,
old enough where the Democrats are openly talking about maybe she should step down. We know she's not going to seek another term. Maybe she is not healthy enough to continue in her job. But instead, they're like, well, she took 3 months off and we're going to welcome her back. We're going to pretend things are fine. I mean, it is...
She forgot she was gone.
3 years ago, it was known. It's one of the biggest sort of untold secrets of Washington. I know, they're like, oh yeah, she's got dementia. It's people in D.C., people in power understand that this is the case. They talk about it openly.
They want to hold on to the seat.
Yeah,
that's everyone around them. I mean, this was with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? There was a huge, I think it was kind of a joke, but that she already had retired and all of her staff were writing all of her comments anyways, right? This was something that people joked about. And I think it's the same thing with as many people. And in fact, if you can have a person like John Fetterman in the Senate seat and get the policy you want through, why wouldn't you pick another candidate who is easily manipulated, right? If you're a handler and you can't personally hold public office for whatever reason, but you can find someone who you can basically puppet and get your policies through, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
Someone else is taking the blows that you don't have to absorb, but you're getting your way. You're holding on to the power.
Well, I mean, it's funny how similar these politicians are to pop stars today. I mean, there's just people behind the scenes writing all of their material for them, making all of the money off of them, and they're just the face of the operation, and they really do run it like a franchise. Once that person is beyond the point of really being able to perform, they hop them up on performance-enhancing drugs so that they can keep doing so. It's horribly cruel.
You guys saw Dianne Feinstein forgot she was gone, right? The big
Yeah.
story was that she said, what do you mean? I've been here the whole time. And they're like...
Also, half her face appears to be paralyzed, and we're not going to talk about that.
Minor details.
She was out for pneumonia, and apparently we're not going to talk about anything else.
I wrote about it in my book when I wrote Liberal Privilege. Joe Biden's had 2 brain aneurysms. If you ask any guy, that's a brain surgeon, you ask a neurologist about the statistical probability of there not being serious issues with 1 aneurysm, it's almost non-existent. With 2, and then when you see it and you see the eyes, and it's just dead.
Or hear him talk.
Or you see the fear. Even worse. When he forgets where he is or can't get off the stage. Because it's not just a little confusion. There's actually a moment of panic, and you see it. And so do our enemies. And so do the people that are making decisions abroad. And it's literally influencing our space in the world right now because that's the nature of predation, right? Predators see weakness and they pounce. That's what they do. That's a story as old as any living being.
And now Joe Biden is competing with himself to become our nation's oldest president. And of course, your father is older as well, but I don't really know that we want to elect our second oldest president who already gets lost on stage.
But Trump is clearly younger cognitively, right?
Yes,
he does
I know
not
guys that are 85 years old that can run circles around my 40-year-old friend.
That's not Joe Biden.
Age is a relative thing. And I get it. I'm not just saying that because my father, but if you sit in a room with my father, it's okay. he can hold court for 3 hours. You can go on CNN. Like, would you put Joe Biden on Newsmax?
Oh my gosh.
No, you can't send Joe Biden out.
No one would even watch.
Did you guys hear the audio of one of his Secret Service members being like, okay, we're just going to walk here and you're going to stand on that X? Like,
well, he still misses it.
He still misses it.
I think there's a video. I could be wrong, so I don't want to get fact checked, but I think there was one where he's like somewhere, and a blind guy literally was like, no, you have to come over here. A blind man was guiding him, and he still got it wrong. Like,
it's the blind leading the Biden.
Literally, yeah. But have you guys considered this, that he just has a speech impediment and you're being bullies? Because that's what I've been told. All of these gaffes are because of a speech impediment.
There are reliable and credible sources that have told me that I am an ableist. So that could be.
You're just leaning into it.
A speech impediment is apparently also a disability, and yes, it is not that. You don't forget where you are because of a speech impediment. You don't forget the name of the person you're trying to introduce. It's not the stutter. You don't forget where the state that you're in. You maybe have a hard time getting it out for a second, but you don't say the wrong place.
And it wouldn't have changed over time. I mean, Joe Biden has been in public office 4 years. We have heard him testify from the floor 100 times. You can see recordings of it. He is not okay. He's even different from when he was the VP, right? Like, you can see a very serious decline in his speech. That's not just a speech impediment.
Also, a speech impediment doesn't make you say poor kids are just as bright and talented as white kids. Right? That's not a speech impediment.
That's character.
That's just how Joe Biden thinks.
I got hairy legs. I'm going to sniff this child. I'm like, the sniffing children thing. It's like,
that should be disqualifying from the get-go. He sniffs kids.
No, but like, hey, if you did it once in a photo op, but like the fact that everyone knows it's a real problem, it's talked about on a daily basis.
Constantly.
And yet he continues to do it because he's incapable of stopping.
Yep.
Right? There's no control there. That's a basic part. Like, I'm sure I have bad habits. If they get me in trouble,
not like that.
You actively work to correct them.
I do what I can to try to correct it. You trying not to curse because we're on YouTube and not Rumble and whatever it is. And I don't do a great job of that. But like, I can usually get by reasonably well. He's stop sniffing children. Like, it's not that hard.
Exactly. Like, I'm trying to figure out which speech impediment makes you ramble about corn pop and sniff kids. And I haven't discovered. I've WebMD'd myself to death, but I haven't found anything.
You're a journalist.
You actually have cancer and AIDS. You spend so much time on WebMD.
But I know, I'm horrified. I have all these diseases.
Diagnosed Joe Biden. And
all this reminds me of that scene from Dr. Strangelove where the dude's writing the bomb down.
Yeah.
Like, we know everything's falling apart. And I'm laughing. But I'm also laughing because y'all are laughing. Like, our president can't think properly. His brain no longer works. We have two senators who are incapable and have suffered medical. They all have some kind of brain issue inhibiting them from functioning. And we're all sitting here laughing as though we are riding that bomb all the way down.
There's nothing you can do.
There's nothing you can do. Well, listen.
Oh, we can vote for your dad.
Yes, well, that's true. But I mean, remember the stuff they did with Trump? I mean, every telepsychologist, every teleneurologist. Oh my God, Trump, he held a banister to walk down a slippery ramp. Like, no, he's just smart enough to hold a banister so he doesn't fall and give them slip and fall. Like,
Joe Biden fell up the stairs 3 times.
They're like, he's fine.
He can't walk up a flight of stairs. It's Air Force One. He knows the cameras are on and he still can't get it right. Like,
he fell upstairs.
They were WebMDing your dad. They're like, oh my gosh.
Well, no, my favorite was that
he's in the later stages of dementia and Alzheimer's. Miraculously, he can give a 3-hour speech, impromptu, off the cuff. No. Not affected there, but he has these issues, apparently, is what I'm told.
I like the armchair psychology. He has narcissistic personality disorder. He is just this terrible human being. You can see it everywhere. Or recently I saw a headline that was he didn't wish his wife a happy Mother's Day on social media. Obviously, there are problems in that marriage. What a strange way to measure someone, that they're not performing the way you want them to, as opposed to Joe Biden, who is actively falling down and getting lost. This is not the same thing.
It's not. Again, whether it's the corruption, whether it's that. I mean, again, I always say, imagine Don Jr. was Hunter Biden. I have a feeling the things that are non-issues would be serious issues.
Yeah, I think so.
If Trump made the daily mistakes of Joe Biden, if he made the errors, if he tripped, if he fell, if he did things that were normal and they could see, it looked like he flinched. Mm-hmm. That must have been a mini stroke.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The amount of just insanity trying to, back into a medical condition. I watched it for the 4 years and 2 years during the primaries.
Well, it's also interesting. You've touched on this a few times here already, but the way the media treats you and your siblings versus the way that they treat Hunter Biden, it's unbelievable, right? And one thing I remember constantly hearing during Trump's presidency, anytime anyone brought up any of your success was, oh, well, they had a rich father. Of course they became successful because when you have a rich dad, your success story. Explain Hunter Biden to me.
Listen. He's an overperforming crackhead. He's actually one of the highest performing.
Overachieving crackhead. He's probably the richest crackhead in the world, to be fair.
The Chinese gave Hunter Biden $1 billion to invest because they apparently invest a lot with crackheads, or they were looking for some diversity and inclusion, and they realized that the people, they didn't want just competent people to invest in. The Chinese are many things, but they're not stupid. They don't give someone with no investment history or prowess unless they're buying something. So of course they were, but the fact that that's not brought up, right? Like
they're buying
the Chinese
crack.
didn't do diligence. They're looking to diversify. They need some degenerate, crackheads to really round out their investment portfolio. They're underrepresented in that.
Don Jr., they're buying crack.
Are we pushing the line?
I want to say, let's be serious. The reason why they're investing in him is, one, I think you're correct. They're buying something, influence of his father, but they're buying something really, really great. This is the perfect investment opportunity for an adversary because not only are you putting money into something that's of value to you, but you have tremendous leverage that Hunter is a crackhead, and that if they ever cross you, you can really you can release the information.
Well, no, because all the information's out and our media doesn't care.
Yeah, but is there one of our enemies that, again, I want to know, and I'd like to see, just out of just curiosity, imagine like the stuff that Hunter was like, maybe I'm not going to video this one. There
has to be something.
Like, this may be a little too far for video.
Yeah, what is Hunter Biden ashamed of?
You got to do it for the Vine.
Do we have an enemy that doesn't have a Hunter Biden laptop? And do they have more? Because the answer, again, you saw the revelations last week, right? 15 entities, all conducting business in places none of the Bidens had ever conducted business. All set up literally the day after he became vice president. All only in the areas where Joe Biden would have authority to do this. The brother has a piece of the deal. The girlfriend has a piece of the deal. The grandchildren, do any of them have international business experience, including Hunter and the brother? But the entire family's on the payroll of these companies. And then you see this week, Joe Biden used his second veto to veto bipartisan legislation that was going against China. The fact that our media won't even ask the question is hey, do you think that maybe you would veto bipartisan legislation? Bipartisan legislation doesn't just happen that much in Washington these days. Mm-hmm. But Joe Biden's going to use it as a veto, much like China. It's the greatest investment they've ever made. $1 billion to China is nothing.
We were talking about this a little bit earlier, the Hunter Biden laptop. And then the question came up what do you think Don Jr.'s got on his laptop? And I was like, I bet it's really boring. I bet it's
by the way, if it wasn't
documents,
if it wasn't, memes. You'd know by now because it would have leaked. Because I'm, other than my father, the most subpoenaed person in the history of the United States government, and they've seen all my phones. And again, if there was that stuff on there, it wouldn't be suppressed. It wouldn't be hidden. It would have leaked. I'm probably the second most vetted person in the history of the United States at this point.
Did they take your devices?
Oh yeah, they get copies of it. I've had to do that. As recently as last week, I had to give another copy of my thing because that's the New York AG and their perpetual witch hunts. I've had
New York
to do
AG
this.
Is crazy.
It's insane and they just fundraise off of it, right? No jury in New York's gonna ever let Trump go because just the social stigma of they'll dox him like they tried doing the Kyle Rittenhouse. They'll figure out how to make it. You can't get a fair jury. These people are in fear for their lives.
In New York,
I almost understand it. As much as I think it's sick, and not everyone has my general let's call it underdeveloped sense of self-preservation. Who will go out there and screw you and screw you and fight other people. They don't have that. It's not that easy. We need to all develop that. We need to become unafraid. Until we do. We got a big problem because they can pick off the guys that'll stand out.
So here's what it feels like to me. Surface level, simplified. I feel like your dad sees something in this country. He sees the issues. They're fairly obvious. He's talked about them for decades. Yeah. And then he's like, I'm going to run for president. I'm going to fix these things. And the moneyed interests that would be harmed by this reacted massively in fear. So you've got corporations that make money off cheap immigrant labor. You've got corporations that make money off outsourcing jobs to foreign countries. You've got foreign adversaries that were extracting wealth and value from our country and bringing our jobs overseas. And then all of a sudden, Donald Trump comes in and says the famous Michael Moore speech where he says to the auto manufacturers, I will put a tariff on your cars at 30% and no one will ever buy it again. And then what do we see during the Trump administration? The return of auto manufacturing to Michigan, bringing, I believe, $3 billion.
Yeah.
That's historic. We see the Abraham Accords. And I'll tell you, recently I had a guy tell me, I was at a poker table, he said, there's no way you like Trump. Because some lady was like, this guy likes Trump. And she was saying it like kind of in a funny way. Yeah. Like she was nice. She liked your dad too. And he was like, impossible. And then I mentioned North Korea. Crossing into North Korea in the DMZ with no security detail. I mean,
all the other guys, they got the binoculars from like 30 miles out looking through it. Like
I said, this is history. These are historic peace deals. We saw the economy booming and they reject it and they refuse. And what do we get instead? It really does feel almost like a yin yang, night and day kind of thing where with the Trump administration, far from perfect, we have an end to wars in the Middle East, an end of ISIS. We have troops being withdrawn from Syria. We have peace in certain parts of the Middle East. We have an attempted peace with North Korea. We have a booming American economy. And it all inverts the moment Joe Biden gets in office.
Yeah, I think that's what's scariest to me was just, again, you think of this thing, the American economy, it's this big ship. Like in 2 years, they eliminated it all. Yeah. Like they got, I mean, when you think about what's going on right now with interest rates, when you think about what's going on with inflation, like, as some of these mortgages start resetting and these 5 and 7 years arms start resetting, like, people are going to get crushed, man. I don't think anyone understands just like we're at like 2008 and perhaps worse, levels again. And it's only a matter of time now. I think, the powers that be are doing whatever they can to delay it, to try to blame it on, whoever, beats Trump or whatever later on. But like, the country's going to go through a lot of pain because of the stupid decisions to try to do this. And by the way, the Republican donor class and that billionaire class, oftentimes just as guilty. It's like, well, we're really anti-China unless we can get our widget for 1 cent cheaper, in which case, so like, I'm not pretending like, it's only the Democrats doing these things, but it's also why the Republican donor class is like, well, we don't want to support Trump this time. It's like, why? Because he made you bring in like American laborers and put Americans to work because we created energy independence. Like now we're getting that we still need it because like, let's not kid ourselves. The batteries, they don't produce themselves. The child slave labor in Africa isn't quite producing, the dream of everyone in America having a car. And, of course their ESG scores aren't affected by that because they subcontract it out. So, you hire a hitman instead of doing the dirty work yourself and it doesn't count. You mentioned the Abraham Accords. Like, that was the holy grail of like geopolitical politics for decades. And everyone was like, it could never get done. It's never going to happen. Trump goes like, why? Well, we've been dealing with this. Same with North Korea. We've been dealing with the issue for 40 years. And it's like, well, have you like actually sat down in the room with the people? No, we would never do that. Well, like, why do we believe the experts? The experts don't know shit. Like
now that those of us who are following the hoaxes, Russiagate and stuff, early on my attitude was like, oh, wow, this stuff's interesting. I mean, could this be true? I remember meeting with a journalist in New York and saying like, is this stuff real? Like, tell me like the stuff that you can't report. What are you working on? And she's like, it's real. It's true. And I was like, wow, really? And I'm like, it's crazy.
It's real because they wanted it to be real.
And then sure enough, I'm like, hey, wait a minute. And as time goes on, then you get the Ukraine Gate scandal, the fake impeachments. Imagine what the news would have been. Imagine what the news should have been with a roaring economy, with manufacturing coming back, with the new U.S. trade deal, the USMCA, with the crushing of ISIS. The media was inverting everything. They called the leader of ISIS an austere scholar, a man who murdered and raped women.
A guy who burned journalists.
Yes.
Like you'd think the media would...
Scholar.
Yeah, austere religious scholar. I remember reading that and... I think we were talking with some of your team downstairs before we started, and I was like, there's days I feel like I gotta be the star of the Truman Show. Like they're just screwing with me. Like it can't be real.
I can't wait for you to find the camera. That's
I'm gonna find the camera one day because it's like I'm being punked. Like I have to be.
Yeah.
Because like there was no other time in history where we'd think we'd having the conversations. There's no other time, in history we'd think the hills that the Democrat Party is willing to die on these days.
Are those Ingersoll Lockwood books real? Like, is that a real thing? You know what I'm talking about? That story about those books from the 1800s that talk about Baron Trump.
Oh yeah, I think
who's
they
running
are
for president. Do you know about this?
No.
So I'm like, this has got to be fake. It's got to be someone pregnant. Supposedly, there are books that were written by a guy named Ingersoll Lockwood in the 1800s that talk about Baron Trump, who lives on Fifth Avenue in New York City, and he runs for president. And then a bunch of anarchists and socialists from the Lower East Side of Manhattan like rush to like protest or something like that.
I don't know. I watched like the Simpsons episode that called some of these things pretty well. Those were pretty amazing.
They were apparently it's a surrealistic novel from 1896. Americans are protesting corrupt election process while the president's hometown of New York City is fearing the collapse of the republic after the transition of presidential power.
I can't believe this is real. Okay. I'm sorry. I can't. I feel like I'm going to talk about this and then someone's going to be like, can you believe Tim Pool fell for that hoax that 4chan did or something like that?
Well, and that's the problem. I mean, there's plenty of things like you can't even discern what's real and what's not some of these things anymore because there's so much out there. It spreads so rapidly. And the problem is some of the stuff that we see in the real world today is so asinine that the hoaxes actually seem almost normal by comparison. You're like, oh yeah, that totally fits with everything I'm seeing elsewhere.
Newsweek is talking about this novel, and he says that Baron Trump's adventures begin in Russia, and the guides are they think directors from he gets directions from the master of all masters, a man named Don. So
a man named Don.
But it started all in Russia because now it's starting to sound a little bit like okay.
This one is Newsweek. I can't.
We got to loop in Russia. Like
the Baron Trump novels are two children's novels written in 1889 and 1893 by Ingersoll Lockwood. They remained obscure until 2017 when they received media attention for perceived similarities between their protagonist and U.S. President Donald Trump.
Dude, who's the guy that found those books?
And that's on Wikipedia. Not that I trust anything on Wikipedia because I think that's one of the more biased things out there, but wow.
You're just jealous that it's not Don Jr. It's Barrett.
I'm a little upset.
That's what this is.
All this fighting, and I'm just going to be... Yeah, no, that's fine. Please let it be someone else.
You want to know something's funny? I tweeted this, and the left... these people have no sense of humor. They don't understand. So I posted a picture of Joe Biden super ripped with aviators, and they didn't say anything. There was no conservative was like, Tim... You're obsessed. You're in a cult. Joe Biden's not good. They knew it was a silly AI thing. And then after the town hall, I did Donald Trump going Super Saiyan, and he's all ripped. And then all the leftists are like, it's a cult. It's a cult. And I'm like, dude, it's a joke. But I tweeted this. Do you know what Donald Trump means?
I don't.
Herald of the world ruler.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't even want to tell him.
I didn't make that up.
He may like that one too much. I don't think.
Well, it's your name too.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It's a solid point.
Donald means world ruler, I guess, in like Scottish Gaelic or something like that.
Wow.
And Trump means the trumpeting sound of like the arrival. So it's the arrival of the world ruler. Yeah.
Just you saying that may drive them crazy.
It does. And I tweeted it and they were like, it's a cult. And I'm like, I am not literally saying I support this man as God Emperor. I'm making a joke. It's a meme. But anyway, you talk about like the Truman Show and stuff, and I immediately thought about the Baron Trump novels.
It's amazing. I haven't even seen that.
Like
one.
We got to be living in. Some
I can't keep track of all the conspiracies. You know what I mean? Like most of them end up coming true, but there's only so much time in the day, and there is a lot of.
Yeah.
You never know.
It's definitely weird because these books are real. You know, it's not like someone, as far as we know, produced them later. They didn't write them after the fact.
No, every now and again though, you have these moments that are such a shock and they're so surreal, but they're still so wonderful. I really was depressingly resigned to the idea that Hillary was going to win in 2016. I really thought she had it. Mm-hmm. And then on election night, I started to see that she wasn't. And I started to see everyone on CNN and MSNBS freaking out and crying. And I thought, oh my goodness.
Being young and conservative, that election night was crazy.
Amazing. And then I remember when he walked out on stage to You Can't Always Get What You Want. And he's just smiling. And I'm thinking, this dude... Hillary Clinton spent her entire life pulling every string she needed to and behaving as cynically as possible so that she could get this position. And then this guy just wakes up one day and is like, I think I could be president, and I think I'm going to do it. And he runs and he beats her. It was like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
What was that like for you guys in the lead up to that decision?
That was pretty surreal. I mean, I did a lot, obviously, on the campaign trail. I mean, but what's really interesting about it is like in 2016, like you felt the enthusiasm, you saw that love, you saw everything, like, but I was like, hey, man, we're going to overperform, but how do you beat that machine, right?
Yeah.
If you asked me in 2020 on the same exact time, I was like, oh, we got this. Like, the enthusiasm was greater. The crowds were greater. The energy was greater. People more... Like, if you asked me...
There was nothing that seemed off at that time?
No. And that's why I'm so skeptical of so much of the other stuff. And from a perspective thing, like, I did 104 rallies in October of 2020.
Wow.
Like October, so that mathematically possible.
It's basically 4 a day.
Oh my god!
For a month, like, and when I say rally, 300 to 1,000 people, maybe 5,000 people at certain ones, but like that's not like a press hit. That was actual like live. So like I was everywhere. I could do 3-4 states a day sometimes. Like So you saw that. And if you asked me between the two, which one, it was like not even close.
Really?
And, again, it was, just from a...
So then what was election night 2020 like?
Again, it felt great. And then it was like, 5 states, all of a sudden they're counting. And it was like,
Yep.
And that's when I was like, that's the, something's going on. And,
Yeah. So how do you feel going into this round? Do you have more skepticism? Do you feel like your strategy has changed?
Well, I think it's a little early for that. But I think people... I think perhaps the most important thing that Trump did was just open people's eyes to that. Trump derangement syndrome, just got people to say the quiet parts out loud. I think there was a lot of subversive stuff going on probably for decades.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I think there was a lot of the nonsense that we see, whether it's Russia, whether it's, the lies about, the Wuhan lab leaks and all. I think that was going on far longer than we ever imagined. But it took Trump to get them to fully lose their minds and just to put all the cards on the table for everyone else to see it. Again, I'm a junkie. I now follow that stuff. I'm not a junkie like Hunter. I'm just like a political junkie.
What are the Chinese buying from you?
CNN within 30 seconds will have Don Jr.'s a junkie. So we're getting it, but I think it's forcing regular people. I don't make any, pretend I don't get where I came from. I'm the son of a billionaire. But if I'm pissed off filling up my car, what's that doing to regular guys? If I take my kids and I bring them to the grocery store because they want me to cook something for dinner or whatever it is, I'm like, damn. If gas was twice as expensive, it probably wouldn't change my habits. Mm-hmm. I'd be pissed, but it's not going to change. There's people, it really affects them. And the fact that I understand this, and it seems like the vast majority of Democrats in Congress do not. Mm-hmm. I'm not supposed to understand that, and yet it's sort of obvious. Now, my outdoor hobbies and stuff like that, I hang out with a lot of good redneck Americans and stuff like that, so I see it. But I think it took Trump to get this. I think it also perhaps took a Joe Biden to reinforce how fragile it is.
Interesting.
How quickly it can disappear. Like I said, I sort of started alluding to it earlier when I was like, it feels like a big ship, but it really isn't. I mean, 2 years, it was like within days. This policy, we're going to get rid of that. We're not going to finish the wall. We can send $130 billion to Ukraine, but we can't finish the wall for 3. Yeah. How dare you want to stop drug trafficking at the border and human trafficking and sex trafficking?
Hunter needs his crack. Yeah.
Do you think that'll be the effect of Joe Biden's presidency? That people who think of themselves as moderate, maybe lean left, will say, "But we can't have another 4 years."
How can it not?
Policies?
I mean, and by the way, if it's not, then perhaps we're already lost, right? Because if people, I can't find someone who could credibly, maybe they'll do it on, CNN or whatever, but name a metric that we're performing better as a country than we were 2 years ago. And by the way, even in the midst of a pandemic, basically, but then, Karine Jean-Pierre, she can get on stage. It's Joe Biden has created more. Now, she can't make eye contact with anyone in the room because it's just the body language tell. Lying, she knows she's lying. He created more jobs than any president in America. No one feels that. No one believes that. Allowing people to go back to work after you shut them out of their jobs, saying, your Starbucks is totally a, required thing, but church isn't, it's a necessary thing, but I don't think anyone believes that.
Take a look at this chart. This is from the New York Post. Yeah. When Biden takes office, inflation skyrockets. And this isn't the only chart. It's just the one I just quickly Google searched. There's one that is more, it's more granular. It gets down into the days. And I remember seeing this, and it talks about wages and inflation. Yeah. The moment Joe Biden is elected, he signs a bunch of executive orders, and we see inflation go straight up and wages go straight down. Yeah. And I've had people say, oh, well, the reason that spike happens has nothing to do with Biden. It's because of the debt spending and COVID. And I'm like, no. You can't say that and then see the change happen literally right after the signing of 30 executive orders. Something he did right when he got in office caused this flip to happen. Yep. Or unless you're arguing some grand conspiracy where Trump set some executive orders to expire that no one knew about.
I don't think anyone can believe that credibly because, again, I don't think that there's anyone, even on the conservative side, that was actually really working with Trump to help him. I think they did everything they could to subvert him, including the Fed, including, I don't think you'd pretend that those guys were working. I think, in the midst of a pandemic, you had to do some spending to keep businesses open. That's fine. But they want to keep that going in perpetuity. It just doesn't work. The math doesn't. You're going to have to pay the piper sometime.
I think I actually may have found Real Clear Politics. This is from Real Clear Politics. Take a look at this. So right when Joe Biden gets inaugurated, you can see wages drop way down and inflation spikes. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Biden administration, right when he comes in, crashes.
Yeah. And that's the sad thing. I mean, bringing those jobs back to America, and I went to boarding school, but I went to boarding school in like sort of old, central Pennsylvania, sort of old, sort of industrial town, one of those towns that, time forgot. And again, growing up, it was the home of Firestone tires and like Mrs. Smith's pies and stuff like that. And you just see these, dilapidated buildings and stuff like that. And it's just like, man, these were once like great, like thriving areas that are just run down. And it's like bringing those jobs back, bringing back American manufacturing, bringing back car manufacturing to Detroit. Like it was happening. Yeah. Like, it's not rocket science. Like, you can do it if you even care a little bit. If you can break away from the billionaires, if you can, you can actually do this still in America. And then to watch that reversal. It's just...
To what degree is it an intentional... Is it a controlled demolition, right?
How could it not be, man? Like, you know what I mean? Like, again, all Joe Biden had to do was nothing. They can't do that.
Let the ship sail.
Let the ship sail, continue it out. They can't, they even say, they want it. Well, and then a year later, they're like, we're going to bring back maybe Trump's policy on the border because, you mean because it was always working? You had to do something different, right? The withdrawal of Afghanistan, a true disgrace. You couldn't just leave it alone the way they had it. You had to change it so you can have the headline of you did it faster. So instead of doing it during the winter when they're hiding in caves, you do it during the fighting season when they can come and take over Kabul in 12 days. But they couldn't see it coming. I'm like, I'm not a military expert, but let's just assume I know jack shit about Afghanistan. Like, I saw that coming.
It's on purpose.
Like they saw it coming, but they needed the soundbite, knowing that there was no consequence because the media, big tech would make sure the story was like, Joe Biden did this. He's a great hero. He had to mess it up. He couldn't leave it alone. They needed to make it their own, and they knew that if they made it their own, even if it's a disaster, they got full coverage by the media of how wonderful and great he is. Just like those same people are telling you that he created more jobs than any president in history.
Yep.
Do you think the American people believe it? Because I feel like a lot of Americans remember what happened in Afghanistan, and they will not be able to forget it.
I think we're chipping away slowly. I think it's why they're going to do what they can to prevent the inevitable, from happening. Because when it gets really bad, when you see that 2008 kind of crash, like they changed the definition of recession a year ago.
Like, what is a recession?
I'm like, if it was under Trump, if you met this level of not GDP growth for this amount of time at any other point in time in its history, they go, well, that's just the way we've kind of done it, but it's not really like etched in stone. But I was like, but you mean you're saying that now because we've hit that level that puts us in a quote unquote recession? But if it was Trump, like, you wouldn't be changing the definition to like pretend like we're not in a recession, even though every metric we've used historically forever has been met to say we are there.
They would make the rules more strict if it was your dad. It's technically a recession.
Yeah, I mean, it really is much worse than
growth was lower than 5% this year, so really it's a recession.
I do love when Obama was like, what did he say? There's no magic wand. You can't get 4% growth.
Abracadabra, bitch. Like, but it is. But again, it didn't take that much. And again, this is with even a lot of the people on our own side working against us. And I mean, that's sort of the miracle of the Trump presidency. Is like he actually notched some pretty serious wins despite the Republicans working. I mean, Paul Ryan and the things that I don't want to do that. Like, if we build the wall, like, we may upset a couple people, like, who hate us, like, and would put us in the gulags. Like, well, I can't have that. I'm like, really? Like,
do you think there are people like that? Like, if your dad wins next year, are there similar people who you would advise him to be careful of, who might work against him?
I think 100%. I think he knows who probably most of those people are.
Do you want to name names?
Well, listen, I'd say, the vast majority of the United States Senate, there's a couple great guys in there, but, a tiny handful. I think, honestly, it'd be much easier to name people who aren't on the list than who are.
Interesting.
Right? I mean, but like, if we're going to be real, I think there's a couple great people in Congress, meaning the House. But again, that's a small part of that machine, right? The unelected bureaucrats, I mean, I'm not sure I can name one that isn't, but no, they did that. They entrench, Obama did that very well. They entrench a bunch of people that are career, and you try to change the job role that, that's not appointed by the president, so you can't touch them. Their life, they could be the most incompetent people in the world, but they got tenure, so they can stay there. Like,
it makes it really difficult to clean house.
It's the least there's no meritocracy in Washington, D.C. If you can get in those positions, you're there for life.
I mean, if you merited anything, you wouldn't be in D.C.
Of course, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
if you're doing survive in the market.
And I think that's the other part of the attack on Trump, which is like, we don't really want someone from out of the system ever doing this again. Like, that system works really well for us, and we'll keep, we want to make part of it's the statement of, hey, if you're another successful guy who's done this in the real world and you want to get into politics and imagine what they try to do to, Elon's not born in America, so he can't do it. But if it was someone like that wanted to run for president, like, yeah, I've done what I put people on Mars and, yada, yada, yada. Maybe I'll do this. Imagine the revolt. They don't want that. That's a threat to the system that they've created that has been very beneficial to them, but no one else.
And that's why it's so important they don't get away with what they did to Trump with the FBI attempting to unseat him.
But this means...
Because that will send the example to the American people that they will beat you if you try to stand up against...
I don't think firing these people is enough.
No, I agree with you. I just don't... Listen, I have my opinions. I have what I'd like to have happen, which is far more grave than what would ever happen. The problem is you actually still have to play within the realm of reality, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I'm compromising my position. My position may be X, but I just know it ain't happening. Nothing's going to happen. Now, I want to keep pushing. I want to make sure we get people elected who can actually try to do that. I'm going to do whatever I can to make that happen. But sometimes we get caught up on, this is what I want, and if we don't do that, I got 99% of what I want, and it's like business. You never get 100% of what you want. Republicans do that poorly. We take our toys home and we cry having 99% of what we wanted, rather than taking the win and we'll work on the 1% starting in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
The Democrats get 51% and they're starting on the next one the next day. They take the win, move on. They take the win, they move on. They take the win, move on. And it's a death by 1,000 cuts. They get where they want. We don't do that well. We don't play that game well. And, and I understand a lot of it's because we're principled, but I think a big part of, my principle is actually getting where I want to be realistically. And I don't want to blow important wins because I didn't get 100% of what I wanted in that. And, people, oh, you're a sellout. I'm like, no, this is how we actually get some win instead of 0 wins whatsoever, which is what we're really good at getting.
I don't know if you would know, but I'm curious your thoughts on a potential vice presidential pick for...
I think it's too early right now. So there hasn't been much
Who's
conversation
on the short
about
list?
it. Honestly,
yours personally.
Yeah.
Listen, I'd want someone in there I just tasked to clean house in certain things, right?
Who would do that, though?
I think there's a couple guys out there that could do that. A couple,
Who
maybe, or women.
Specifically?
I'm not going to go there because I know what the media will then. And Donald Trump Jr. is undercutting his father, and he's announcing the but. No, listen.
Yeah, Hannah Claire.
If we list a bunch of people, would you not?
Would you tell us hotter or colder?
Yeah, you're getting warmer. I don't know. Maybe we put Tim Pool in charge of DOJ, just cleaning out.
Lock him up, Tim.
No, but I think you get some people. I get people like Trump also who don't care anymore. Some of the people who've been wronged.
Yeah.
Okay, the people who they tried to break, who they tried to bankrupt, and probably did in many cases. I'm not saying all of them, because there's some that, again, you got to, but there's some of those people that now understand that their life meant nothing to these people. And when that happens to you, maybe it happened to me, okay, you know what? I don't want to curse, but F you, and we're going to, we don't care. And I think, again, that's the most important, that, as much of a just total reset. Not to, again, that word will be used against me as, oh my God, conspiracy theory, you're not allowed to say it. But just if we could start from scratch and eliminate as much of that bureaucracy as possible, have people willing to be this guy's the North Korea. He was an expert. He led the North Korea policy for 40 years. I was like, what'd you do? Well, Trump's doing it all wrong. But why?
Well, hold on.
Because you've led it for 40 years, but you've accomplished nothing in 40 years. Why should I believe you?
But you don't, what you got to do is you got to sit him down and say, what would you say you do here?
Well, Bob's.
You can't touch me.
It'll feel like Office Space all over again.
I want to say, I despise politics. I would never want to be involved. People jokingly say, maybe, why don't you run? Why don't more people run if you're so pissed off? And I'm like, I just don't want to go anywhere near it. I can't believe people want to. I told Carrie Lake, I can't believe you want to keep running. She's talking about the Senate. But if Donald Trump said, look, you complain so much about these people, we'll put you in charge of all the indictments. It's yours now. I'd be like, yes.
Yes.
Everyone is going to jail. Everyone's
I think we need a team of rabble rousers that are
everyone's going
informed conspiracy theorists who have been far more right, who have been far more correct than all of our elite and educated media. Just let them, give them each a task and just be like, have at it.
I mean, frankly, informed and conspiracy theorists are a redundancy these days.
The conspiracy theorists, they're batting like 1,000 as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
And like,
even Elon Musk, he said recently when he was in an interview, he was like, well, a lot of them turned out to be right. And the guy's like which ones? And he goes, the Hunter Biden laptop. And then the interviewer goes, okay, well, that was true.
Stop bringing it up.
Again, I always talk about Wuhan Lab Leak because it was so obvious. Like
Jon Stewart goes on Colbert and says it.
Of course it happened there.
It's the most obvious thing in the world,
the only one more obvious than that was Jussie Smollett because but like, of course it didn't. You're telling me it came from 3 feet outside of the bio lab that studies the exact virus that leaked,
was
like
crazy.
By magic, like it just. And if you were in academia, if you were a doctor and you questioned, like there was no other answer. There was no other option. Of course, it was that. Like,
and the former CDC director said that pressure was put on him to not acknowledge that publicly.
There was a scientific paper.
Yeah, he's a conspiracy theorist.
I think it was South China University in Beijing or whatever it's called, where they said
called "If We Did It."
No,
where they published that.
Yes, if we,
but
this is
like OJ looking for the murderer, like walking in circles. Like
if we did it. This is early on. They said bats had bitten people and urinated on people, and that's what they think caused the leak. And then they quickly said, we retract this, we got rid of it, because probably the CCP came in and said, do you enjoy living? And they were like, we do. I said, then get rid of it.
Of course. Well, the guy that top scientist that went missing that asked a question, a question, and and then obviously you saw this stuff in congressional testimony during peak. It was like the Fauci emails versus the Fauci TV appearances, on the cover of like Vogue magazine or whatever the hell he was doing. Like, they were literally a contradiction. Like, you cannot. So was he lying to the American public or was he lying to his colleagues in medicine? Because they were literally polar opposites. One of them has to be a lie.
No, everything.
So
he
who
says
is he
true.
lying to?
Can't question Dr.
He's
Fauci.
the science. I'm not sure if you're aware of this.
Yeah.
He is the science.
He is the science. And again, because that became the religion of the left, and he was the high priestess of that religion, you could not question it. But I'm like, but how do you not question a polar opposite? Like, you can't, two things that are opposite cannot be true at the same time. Like,
he declared himself God. He said, "I am truth." He literally did. "I am the science." What?
Well, he loved it. That guy spent his life getting his ass kicked, and I think that can be good for a lot of people. But he was just bitter at the world, and he got a moment to be like that star, and he took it. And your health, your grandmother's life, your children's lives, their well-being, their education, your business, our economy meant nothing to him relative to him being on another magazine cover, getting a little bit of attention from a celebrity. None of it meant shit.
I know it is early. You mentioned that, but I'll try asking anyway. Do you intend to be working on your father's administration?
I don't know. Maybe that's not officially. I'd love to maybe be in there as an advisor.
Were you an advisor last time?
Yes, but I just sort of do these things. I just go out there and I campaign. I don't, you know what I mean? So I know what I'm good at, and I'm sort of I stick to my lane. But I think in this one, I now know, and I've spent so much time out there, fundraising for Republicans and fighting these battles, and I just feel like I'm very close to the ground on these things. So I'd be like, we're not hiring that person. And here's why. Here's the person you should hire, or here's the people you should talk to about that job.
The reason I ask is because I think you're probably the second most popular Trump, as you also mentioned, the second most subpoenaed and investigated. But I also think that you have a very good ear to the cultural issues that are entrenched in our politics. And I think your dad would benefit greatly from listening to you.
Yeah, no, listen, that's what I do. I mean, it's sort of become, really de facto my job. Is it means something to me. I promise you, it was a lot easier to be a real estate developer from New York and be invited to the cool person party. And I could, when I was young, I could go to any club in New York I wanted, and I got tables. And I don't even want to try now. Yeah. It's and by the way, there's plenty of people that are sort of closet thumbs up, but they won't say it out loud. So it's not the end of the world, but it's just so different that, but for me, I actually believe this stuff. I've always been, in that fight. I've always been a conservative. Even, again, I shouldn't be, but because of, the upbringing I talked about with my grandfather from communist Czechoslovakia, I got a taste of that. I understood it. Then spending time in that, sort of, 8th grade through 12th grade in, Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, my friends were from these places. I saw what those decisions, those policies. My father's been really he was talking about, at the time it was Japan, taking advantage of us in trade like China is now. But this is from the 80s on Oprah. He's been very consistent about these issues, and I saw it sort of peripherally in my life, and now it's sort of become that. I'm out there fighting for these things. I got 5 young kids. I want to let them grow up in a country that like I recognize, and I see just how quickly it's all changed. I see just like the conversations we're having today, the hills to die on for the Democrat Party. Like 5 years ago, we'd have been like, come on, like you can't, like no way.
Yeah.
And yet it's happening. It's so fast, the erosion of decency and everything we believe in, and like we got to fight against that. And if I have a good base and I have a following and I can use that, like that's more important than anything else I could be doing.
I want to show you some articles from back in the day. This one is from Vox. Says Donald Trump is the perfect moderate, and they put moderate in quotes. They're not actually calling Donald Trump a moderate. They're insulting him.
Yes.
What they go on to say is why we mistake extremists for moderates. But hold on there a minute, Ezra Klein, who wrote this. This is from Matt Iglesias. 2 years later, Trump won by running as a moderate Republican. That is actually serious. He says his undoing will be that he isn't governing like one.
By the way,
they actually made that claim. And I think most reasonable people who actually have paid attention to politics over the past few decades view your dad. He's been called a New York Democrat, a traditional liberal who's now running as a conservative because the left has gone so insane that now being a moderate is considered far right by the press.
Well, by the way, I think that's accurate. There's no question. I mean, Kennedy today would be alt-right.
Are you kidding? Yeah.
Right, he'd be a Nazi and he'd be all the things that we apparently are. And like
you have that cartoon where the World War II soldiers get transported to the future.
Yeah. So we did a cartoon a few years ago where a bunch of lefty SJWs like build a time machine because they want to bring back the guys who defeated Nazis to fight the Nazis, and they bring them back and they're just horrified by what these World War II veterans are saying.
Yeah, but I mean
segregation
and their
was still
actual
around
political positions. Yeah.
I look at Antifa and I'm like, please explain to me, like, based on your actions, how are you anti the FA part?
Yeah.
It feels like if you have even a modicum understanding of history that they are actually acting like the fascists that they seem to pretend to protect us from. I don't understand.
No,
like,
no,
I can explain this.
Yeah, we're anti.
They picked the correct marketing first.
Yes.
No, I can explain this. And to be fair to them, they're actually correct. The fascists were traditionalists. They were authoritarian and more traditionalist. And the communists were progressive and authoritarian. So the authoritarian thing is they have that in common, but they want to destroy the family. They want to destroy traditional values, erase culture, and then build their own weird Marxist garbage.
But it's weird.
So that I get.
That's fair. But I look at the brown
fascism is
shirt
nebulous.
fascists and just,
Exactly.
burning books and this kind of stuff. I'm like, I don't know. So you're right. Maybe the end result is, but the actions, sort of.
Their protest, Antifa, they genuinely believe they're anti-fascist because they think fascism is family. It should be actually anti-family.
That's literally
true. That's a better Antifa.
No, that's literally true. That's how they understand it. The thing about fascism is it's very nebulous and it can fit into many different containers. Like the question is, what is the ethos of the people of the country who are living under fascism, and then the state is supposed to fully embody that. Like Benito Mussolini and Giovanni Gentile write in The Origin of Doctrine of Fascism, nothing of value, human or spiritual, can exist outside the state, and the state must be above all, including the church, which are all things that the left believes, right? Yeah. And so it is kind of a fascist system because they're saying our ethos is a progressive ethos, and so the fascist state must embrace progressivism. So they are fascist.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Violent.
Yeah.
Very much. Very much. Well, and this is also like fascism.
We want
like
freedom.
The fasci.
While we're
fasci,
beating someone over the head with a brick. I'm like,
well, let me
there's a huge part. Like the fasci, the whole metaphor comes from a bundle of sticks. We're stronger together. I mean, there's truth in the fact that people are stronger together, but when you become so collectivized that you lose all individuality, that's a very serious problem. And you see that with lefties. When you get them away from their group, they're not quite as far to the left when you have a one-on-one conversation. Yes. I've said this before. There are only leftist groups, not leftist people.
What do you think about Patriot Front? Have you seen those videos?
I mean, yes, but like,
they look
do we really want to pretend like it's not a Fed operation? No, but
it's went straight for it.
It's like the Gretchen Whitmer thing. It's like we're gonna find like the one meth head right wing guy and like get them to follow along. So they're gonna find one guy. They're gonna frame him as though he was trying to overthrow the government. Because it's
you weren't
it's
convinced
so obvious.
By this police.
I'm looking. I'm like, hey, dude, those guys all look like a lot like my guys that when I had a Secret Service detail. Like they're all sort of in shape, good looking guys. I'm like,
you're like,
I
Tom,
don't know, dude.
Is that you?
Yeah, that's. it's so ridiculous. Well, and it's so obvious. It's like the same thing. Like, the Whitmer one's a great example. It's like, so after, it's a threat to the governor. I was like, you mean after like 2 years of baiting and you finally found the one drug addict that, like,
dude.
And it's like, we got him. Like, you are literally entrapping, like, they should be guilty. It's lunacy. But again, you don't even hear that story. You hear, conveniently right before an election that there was a plot to assassinate, set up by like 12 people, like people, and those guys get promoted, and those guys then are the people investigating J6. I mean, it's not a coincidence.
And they stay in their bureaucracy.
There's no consequence. Again, like, well, we got caught, we didn't do a great job, so let's start a rally and invite, maybe we find one person dumb enough to like go for this, and hopefully we can sell them a firearm on the side and they can carry it, and even if they have no intention of using it, that's going to be the precipice for the investigation because they clearly were trying to murder someone.
Now, call me crazy, but I think the purpose of law enforcement should be to prevent crime, not invent fake criminal plots.
Correct.
To entrap some random person who never would have gotten involved with that activity if he wasn't radicalized by feds in the first place.
Yeah, you can't high-five yourself for saying we stopped extremists if you created an extremist.
Yeah, when the arsonists are calling the fire department, it sort of loses the, I'm like, I don't know, like...
No, it's literally that, though. It'd be like if the fire department went around trying to get people to start fires so that they could put them out.
But they have...
Like, no, play with matches, buddy.
Ryan Long has that sketch. Ryan Long, the comedian?
Yeah.
Him and Danny Polishchuk wear their Antifa window repair. And they were like, at night, we go out, we smash the windows, then we show up, we leave the flyer behind, then we show up in the morning, and we fix the windows for them.
That's hilarious.
That's basically what the FBI's been doing.
Yeah, and by the way, meanwhile, when there's actual crime or actual domestic terrorism, like, a guy driving through a Christmas parade in Wisconsin, well, we had him on our radar, but we were too busy trying to trap a meth head, like, into a fake kidnapping plot. Like, they've been watching all these people, but they're either, they check a couple identity boxes, so they're not allowed to actually pursue that because, God forbid you find someone who's a criminal that, maybe trans or otherwise or just a minority, or we can't actually pursue that. So we got to try to find... like the amount of people that were on their radar that just magically slipped through the cracks to actually go commit a crime because they're too busy trying to create a crime that they can actually... How about just like try to prevent an actual crime?
Well, that's what I found
just
to be
do that. It's not that hard. Like that's what you're supposed to do.
That was the craziest part of listening to the opening statements at January 6th, which is, the government saying like, we had FBI informants and so we knew all about what was happening. But then you get the question of like, then why didn't you have additional reinforcements? If something bad was going to happen and you knew about it, aren't you an accessory to the crime?
Yeah, and then they say, Trump, he authorized the National Guard. But he can't, but he couldn't by law send them there. You have to get either Nancy Pelosi or Muriel Bowser, the D.C. mayor.
And they both said, no, thank you.
So they said, well, Trump didn't do anything. I was like, he literally offered, it's almost like, listen, it's almost like, and it's strange. We don't hear about the bombs planted at the DNC or the RNC anymore. Like
those disappeared.
You'd think that would be a really big story unless... it was all a setup, right? And you got what you wanted out of the other part of the setup. If the other thing didn't happen quite that way, the bombs would have been a really big deal. Yep. But again, I don't know how far we can go down this rabbit hole, while on regular YouTube. But
we got a lot to talk about in the members section. So maybe what we'll do is like right when we wrap, we'll just start the members members show right away. But we're gonna go to Super Chats right now and read comments from y'all and take some of your questions. So if you haven't already, would you kindly smash that like button and subscribe to this channel? But more importantly, go to timcast.com, click join us, become a member. At about 10 or so p.m., we will put up the members-only uncensored show so we can talk about a lot more stuff and current news goings-on. It'll be a lot of fun. But for now, let's read what y'all got to say. Lizzie K says, hey, Tim, love the show. Joe Biden was born closer to Lincoln's presidency than his own. Lincoln's assassination was 4/14/1865 to Joe's birth, 11/20/42, is 77 years, 7 months, and 6 days. Joe's birth to his inauguration is 78 years, 2 months. Pretty wild.
Yeah,
that's kind of crazy if you think about it. That means like Joe Biden could have a grandfather who was around for the Lincoln presidency.
Yeah, his name was John Wilkes Booth.
Yeah, it goes. It's that conspiracy is that deep. Could you imagine Joe Biden be like, my grandfather told me stories, man, about President Lincoln
and his hairy legs.
He got hairy legs.
Lincoln had hairy legs too.
All right, I'm not your buddy guy says let's make saying you're fired great again.
I think that's right. That would be that would be my policy decision if I have any influence over it whatsoever.
Matthew Reckamp says, in regard to your conversation about bears in a previous stream, Annie Oakley killed a 500-pound bear with a 22 through the eye socket.
Wow.
Without feminism. She just did it.
Yeah, she just did
Wow.
it.
I didn't even think that was possible without girl power.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's wild.
Steven says, Donald, after seeing how deep the swamp runs, do you have any political aspirations?
It's interesting. People ask me that a lot. Maybe. Right now, honestly, I feel like I can almost do more not being a part of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's fewer restrictions.
You got to play by rules. You got to do this. You got to so I can do that. I can help people along the way, guys that I really like, try to help them, get them there, and actually not have to deal with like the nonsense that is so prevalent in there. So again, I think there's a component of it. I love being in the fight. I actually like a lot of the stuff that Republicans aren't traditionally good at, like actually getting in the mud and fighting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I want the day job right now, but that doesn't mean it's permanently
Would you want to do it in New York
yeah.
or Florida? Because I feel like New York needs you more.
I'm never going back to New York. Like I kept my cabin upstate.
Good for
like,
you.
I'm just not doing it. I initially go down the tax code. Like if they reverse the tax code, I'm not going. It's just so different.
Yeah.
But
I got to read this.
Uh-oh.
Anthony Brownlee says, Donald Trump was the best president we've ever had, and I hope Junior will run in the future. Thanks for everything you and your father have done for our country.
I appreciate that, guys. Honestly, it's that stuff that when you see that, and I see it a lot, you go out to dinner and I've had this, man, it was hard. Like, a couple of weeks ago, I was out to dinner, I took my son, and he wanted to go get sushi or a little, but like this Marine sat next to it, and like I go to pay, and this Marine had picked up our dinner just as a thank you for, like, I'm like, wait, dude, you can't, like, come on. But it was like, you could see he was legitimately going to be like insulted if I wasn't going to do it. Yeah. And I was just like, so it's like, that's what makes all the BS, all the inquisitions, all the 50 hours of, like, when you see that, like, if it actually makes a difference in someone's life and they see that and they're waking up to what really is out there, like, that makes it all worthwhile. And and perhaps that's what eventually gets you to actually, do that.
How did your son react to that moment? Are they like kind of getting used to it, or is it?
It's interesting. So like, for me, it was different because my kids, like, we grew up in New York City, and like that got tough for a while before we moved to Florida, right? Like, parents would tell kids something. They tried messing with my son a couple times. I finally told one of my sons, I like, listen, if someone's being like that to you, and like you do whatever you can to defend yourself, and you'll never. I don't care if they throw you out of school. Like, you're not getting in trouble with me.
Yeah.
And the kid messed with him. Son, took care of it, and like it never had a problem again. But like it was really prevalent. Like you could see like parents being vicious to, like, and my kids are young, right? Like my oldest just turned 16, and this is 7 years ago, right? Like it, and the 16 thing's a whole nother story because that's scary as hell. But but going down to Florida, like I went to pick up, my son at school, and put him in under a different name and this, that, and the other. And I go one day and pick him up. And like, I'm looking around, like, there's kids like wearing MAGA hats at his school, and I'm just like, oh my god, like, okay,
yeah.
And so it's really interesting. Like down there, like, I have a hard time buying my own dinner sometimes in Florida,
wow.
Like where we're at. Like, it's a real conservative area, and it's interesting. It's not just like the people. I was sort of surprised because like we live in a really nice neighborhood, and I was like, it's gonna be okay. It's a lot of New York transplants. I'm like, okay, fine. Like I was hoping for normalcy, and like. The house next to me, before they even knew we bought our house, they had like a big cardboard cutout like you have of Donald Trump, like in their window at that, like this,
yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is going to be the place for us. It's been awesome. So, down there, it's been so welcoming for them because they see, people come up to me, whether every walk of life. If we're at a restaurant, the busboy, love what you guys do.
After being kind of treated like enemies or
and so they're like, yeah, oh, dude, like my kids were like, they thought I was, because again, you see it there must be something. Dad must be doing something wrong. He sees it now, and it's like, oh, he's actually like loved. Like it's,
yeah.
And it was such an important change. Like I think honestly, staying in New York for them would have been like a psyop, like negative. I think it could have screwed them up for life. It would have hurt my relationship with them. It probably did at some level. Because again, you're a kid, I mean, it's why they're so adamant about going after minors, whether this is with the trans stuff or that, like, that is an impressionable mind. Like, it could be my child who knows me well, but like, well, this is someone it's an authority figure. There must be something to it. So Florida for us has been awesome. And I would never, like I said, I kept my cabin upstate where I can go there and I'm getting high fives from all the locals. It's cool. Like, it's different. But like, we'd never go back to the cities.
Yeah. Let me read this from Agamemnon's Gym Bag. Mr. Trump Jr., awesome to see you here. I respect the hell out of you, but why the support for Bud Light and Anheuser-Busch Is it just their donation history? Convince me to sell my puts.
Oof. Yeah, and honestly, I think it wasn't even that. I think I probably, when you talk on air or whatever, you like, maybe I got a little over my skis on something. But like the reality, I was like, it's sort of weird when I look at all the other like just terrible offenders. It was just sort of shocking to me that it was like this one became that bad. And I'm someone who's, I think you had Michael Seifert on the show, like, I've invested in Public Square and these companies that are out there like literally doing the opposite. So it was an interesting one to me. I see Nike, I see all these other companies, and I was just like, I don't get, like, why don't we do this to all of those? So I think my comments got sort of blown out of proportion, but the reality is, like, I've put my money where my mouth is on these things, trying to help the businesses that are fighting on that one. So it was an interesting one for me because I saw, and again, I think there's also a component of it, things are blown up in a primary because, like, how do we dunk on Don Jr.? He's a lib. Like, I'm like, no, I was just making some points.
But you didn't feel obligated to protect them.
No, dude, I'm not crying for anyone. Like, you see what's going on. Watching the guys double down now, whether it's Miller Lite, that
was actually before.
That was before.
Yeah.
And now you saw the Ford commercial your guys were showing me down there with the the Ford Raptor that turned into like the tranny car, and I'm like, oh god, like what's going on? And so again, I'm not shedding any tears for anyone in any of these things, but again, in a primary season, people are going, oh yeah, he's gone. So there's a component of BS to a lot of these things. And again, I think the biggest thing is, I think if you look at what I'm doing and the companies I'm out there trying to promote and support and literally invest in, it's the guys fighting for those culture battles. So
let's and I'll just add to it. I think when you said it, I think my response was like, I disagree. No, I think we should keep doing it. But and then we moved on. I didn't think anybody.
Yeah, and I didn't even think of it at the time. So like I was like, I'm just sort of surprised that's the one. Like what about like when you see the Nike stuff and the Adidas? I'm like, why aren't we doing like it? It just felt like there's a lot more there. I guess it was just like it's strange that was the one to me, I think.
Let's grab this one. Aaron Preston says, Tim, last week you talked about an OnlyFans model that was wheelchair bound due to her implants. Well, a few days ago, one of her implants exploded because they were too large. Yep. So we need a cultural shift in this country.
Is that like the trans-abled one where people are disabling themselves
no,
because they want to be disabled?
No. This is a woman who wants to get fans on OnlyFans.
Oh, wow.
So she got implants all over her body. They're so large she can't walk anymore. So she had to get a mobility scooter to move around.
I mean, you got to pay the rent. Seems...
Yeah, man, people's brains.
Bills? Like, was she investing in her business on OnlyFans by getting the implants? Did she go into debt?
I don't know, but it was if your income is OnlyFans, I guess they could write off the implants, so they're playing with 50-cent dollars here for the implants that made her unable to walk,
and that have now exploded.
Just Leave Me Alone says, Don Jr., will you please run for our next governor of Florida? We need a Trump businessman to keep our state free-ish.
Is that a yes?
I know it's not. Okay, relax. As I said, maybe one day. Right now, it's probably not that time. But I'll continue. Listen, I promise I'm going to continue to fight for this stuff because, again, it matters. Yeah. And I think we see how it's almost frustrating, right? You see just how ridiculous it's getting. Like, and again, I just wish, honestly, it's why I'm sort of disappointed in some of the other Republican kind of. It's like. You know what you have to just go all in. Like if everyone in the Republican side went all in, if the people who support them became unafraid, like we'd actually win. Like they're not going to cancel 175 million Americans.
Nope,
they can't do it. But if you put one guy out there at a time, one guy has the balls to actually go out there and do this. Like they'll take him out.
Yeah,
they did that to my father. They did it to the most powerful man in the world. Like. They can do that. If everyone's like, oh, I don't want that because there's a little bit of a social. I'm not going to be liked at the PTA meeting. I'm like, you shouldn't go to the PTA meetings at this point anyway because the FBI is going to label you a domestic terrorist. But we should run for our school boards so we can prevent the indoctrination of our children.
Mm-hmm. This is a good one. Crooked Smile says President Trump should host a TV show firing all the corrupt politicians responsible for all the many hoaxes. If he charged $5, I'd gladly buy it just to see them slimy politicians squirm. I think if there was like a government program in the Trump administration where it was like $10 a month, subscribe, and you get to watch Trump fire corrupt bureaucrats and politicians.
You can co-sign the order. And just listen.
The audience votes. The audience votes for the person.
We're making like The Apprentice. You know what I mean? But yeah, like you. And again, they'll say Trump is trying to enrich himself with the fight. No, we'll give the money to the U.S. Treasury. You know what I mean? We'll pay down some of the $31.5 trillion in debt that they're racking up. And I think we could pay back a pretty good chunk because a lot of people would pay to be a part of that.
I think I think everybody would subscribe instantly and be like, you just turn it on all day and let it run 24/7, and it's your
You
dead.
could actually probably get rid of taxes.
Right.
You know, enough people. We're like, we're generating enough revenue without taxes now because
You've just got the Bobs. Adam Schiff walks in. And what do you say you do here? All right, Seth Weathers says, Conservative Dad's ultra-right beer will be available for distribution in Florida next month. Don Jr., will you put it in Mar-a-Lago on tap? Have you heard of it?
I've seen some of this stuff. I know that a bunch of guys were starting, talking about some of that stuff. So yeah, listen, get me some information.
Seth Weathers launched Conservative Dad's ultra-right beer in response.
I saw it on social. Yeah,
much like we have Jeremy's chocolate.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I think this is great that people are basically launching alternatives to these companies. If they want to get woke, they can go broke. So we ordered a bunch, Seth. We ordered a bunch for here because we keep drink stocked for our guests. So I'm looking forward to that. Let's grab some more super chats. Agamemnon's Gym Bag says, Seamus and company, let's hear your best Trump impression.
My Trump's not that great.
I'm gonna have to immediately bow out.
Quite frankly, okay. What am I supposed to talk about?
Oh no, I'm only reading this one because his son is right here.
Don Jr.'s your favorite son.
Some people are saying, I won't name names. Some people are saying it's a great impression. What's yours? Do you do an impression?
I don't
Can all
do
of your
Trump.
siblings?
No.
There's a couple things I don't do the Trump impression. I don't make fun of hair because maybe the Trump hair gene kicks in one day, and so I'm like, I'm just not going to play with it. I'm just going to leave it alone.
It's risking too much.
It's a karma thing. I'm just
I gotcha.
I'm just not going to go there.
Is that what the impression too? You think you're gonna get to his age and just sound identical?
Yeah. They already say I have the hand gesture. It's funny. Like when I'm doing my podcast on Mondays at 6 and Thursdays at 6 on Rumble. He called me. He's like, I saw the podcast content. You got a lot less hands.
He does do the voice.
A lot less hands, Don. I go, like, how much less hands? He goes, like 95% less hands. I go, you mean, like I'm going 20 times more hands. Like he speaks with his hands too.
He does the accordion thing.
Yeah. So I guess I do that too, and I get impassioned, and no one's ever said I'm low energy. You get thrown out of the window of Trump Tower if you're low energy in my family, and so
that's great.
Like I was doing, but he was like, yes, 95% less hands. So like, I was like, man,
did you feel like that was the pot cut, like the kettle calling pot black?
Okay, so
you're like, sir, king of the hand gesture.
100%. It's like when honestly the best. Yes, because there's a couple times where I'm like, we have to have a discussion about self-awareness. I would get a call sometimes when he was president. I'd get a call from the White House, and Don, you're too aggressive on Twitter.
What?
I'm like, really? Like, wow. Like, I'm like,
you have already
what you said about Rosie was horrible. It was very.
It's like that 80s like drug commercial. Like, I learned it by watching you, Dad. Like, it's like, I'm sitting there and be like, man, like of all the things, like I'm not saying like I will listen to him on many things if he's got business advice, political. I mean, the guy's done a lot. He's accomplished a lot. I was like, this is the one place where maybe you've ceded like the moral high ground here. Like, I'm like, I don't understand. Like,
of all the things,
and I get it. I mean, with Kimberly, like, it was, and she'd be like, I'm like, it's the White House. She's like, oh, what'd you do now? I'm scrolling, trying to figure out what I said, and I was like, I don't know. It's like, it's
you gotta tone it down.
You can't turn some things off.
I learned it from you, Dad.
Yeah.
All right, what do we got here?
Should have been much nicer to that reporter.
Yeah,
she's a good lady.
You're too aggressive. Iggy Thinkybus says, Seamus, you should animate this Fetterman speech like you did with Biden's corn pop story.
Oh, ooh. I totally should. By the way, yeah, we made an animation a few years ago of Joe Biden's corn pop speech because when he's telling the story, you kind of can't tell what he's talking about. So we like boarded it out and put animation to it. So maybe I should do the same thing with what Fetterman said so we can make sense of it.
No, that's impossible.
Yeah, I don't know because I thought the corn pop speech was impossible to make.
Well, the corn pop was ridiculous, but like the Fetterman thing is literally like just verbal diarrhea. Like it's
true.
No, you look at that, be like the Republic's over. Like you pack it up, folks. Like
I like it because Fetterman keeps gesturing,
riding the bomb down, swinging the head.
Yeah,
here we go. Here we go. Robert Knight says Joe Biden is the victim of elder abuse. We should highlight that constantly.
Yeah.
Shame on Jill and his handlers.
Oof.
Well, 100%. I mean, listen.
Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
We all know people or family or whatever that have gone through these things as they get older and stuff like that. But like that they can, he's going to run again. It's going to be great. What could go wrong? I'm like, what could go wrong? Like, have you turned on like the news? Like we're on the brink of World War III.
Yeah.
Like,
do you ever feel like
wrong?
they're running him because Kamala never picked up any popularity? And so
I think if they could, replace him with someone that checks a lot of those boxes. Oh, it's not even a question.
I always had the impression they wanted
Kamala
him to be a one-term president.
Yes. Like she was the designated heir, and they assumed that she had both brains and capability. And
it turns out no.
It turns out she has neither. But like, again, but only because they put her in there because she checked off those boxes. Like it doesn't take a lot, to understand that there's not really any of that there. And based on even the work history and all that stuff, like it's all, created optics, but never real actual accomplishment. Like, you guys actually next time talk to Kimberly more about it because she worked in that like San Francisco DA's office with you. You just understand what's, she's got a lot of ambition, but that's probably about it in terms of that. But that'll get you far.
Jake says Ingersoll Lockwood was also a watchmaker. Where Ingersoll lived and made watches have some interesting synchronicities with the modern Trumps as well. So I guess there were two books, and there was another book called, what was the third one? 1900, The President or whatever.
The Last President, I think.
The Last President. And it's about like the socialists storming Fifth Avenue, a hotel on Fifth Avenue or something like that. People think that
I've got some books for you to read.
Apparently.
I got to study up.
Yeah.
I haven't done much of my, 18th century
literature.
There's
your 18th century time traveling fiction is not brushed up.
It has not been.
You came on this podcast without brushing up on your 18th century
I'm a little bit.
fiction?
I will hang my head in shame.
What is it? I think
Full
Jack
book review
Posobiec.
on your podcast.
I hope Trump gives you another call.
Yeah, exactly. I can't believe you haven't read about Baron Trump.
It's part of our family's history.
I think it was Posobiec who said his favorite conspiracy is that Steve Bannon is Baron from the future, that he comes back in time to.
By the way, I love that.
Oh my gosh,
that's amazing.
Yeah, so in terms of like the hand gesture thing, people on the freedom side of things, whatever you want to call it, some people call it right, but then conservatives, they don't consider people like me conservative or whatever, but. We can make memes and laugh about Trump doing the accordion hands.
Yeah.
Where it's like as he's talking, and it's hilarious. And we can also make Joe Biden cartoons of him telling the corn pop story. We laugh at all of it. But the left, they can't handle it.
No.
It's like apostasy.
No, they freak out.
It's blasphemy, sorry.
No, it's blasphemy. And this is something I've noticed too. Like, when there are a lot to their credit, like there are some people on the left who will like watch my videos and enjoy them, but then there are some people on the left who they'll see my videos and they'll say something like, "Oh, well, it was funny when he made fun of like Dave Rubin, but I don't like the rest of his stuff." It's like I was funny when I was making fun of someone you don't like.
Right.
That's what you're saying. Like I was funny when I made fun of someone you didn't like, but then I just stopped being talented when I was making fun of people you do like. It's remarkable.
I feel it's like everything else, though, whether it's the attack on the family. I mean. They don't want any place that you can go for joy. Like, humor is gone. I mean, I think of like the stuff that the funniest comedy of when I was in like college, like, when Chappelle was doing Chappelle Show and stuff like that, like you couldn't do those skits today. I mean,
no.
The black white supremacists are one of the great skits of all time. And like, you'd never get away with that today.
Yeah.
You're almost like, when you pull it up for like a refresher once a year to be like, that was fun. Like, you're almost like, I don't know, like it's on my search history now. Like, I can't.
Adam Schiff's going to indict you for that.
Yeah,
I grew up in a different
He watched
time.
white supremacist content. Yeah. Dave Chappelle. Yeah.
It's crazy.
All right. My third nut says, "Hey, Don Jr., I'd vote for Trump. However, his recent 2A statements at the town hall have me feeling a bit soured. Why does he seem apprehensive towards 2A support? If he became pro 2A, I'd vote for him without hesitation."
I don't know. I don't remember his 2A statements about that. I mean, I know he's, you see what's going on right now. I mean, I'm going to actually do a whole show with a buddy. I mean, obviously, I'm probably about as big a 2A guy as I can. That's probably my like single issue vote thing. And I shoot competitively. I have my wife. Nice. I'm a big hunter. Like I'm going to do a whole thing on my show on Monday with my buddy George Armstrong, who's a manufacturer actually, and talking about all the stuff as it relates to the pistol brace stuff coming up. And so I must have missed those comments on that, but what's going on right now and the threat and the attack and the registrations and all of this stuff, all without, done through the ATF and unelected officials, is crazy stuff. And I know there's a couple guys in Congress trying to do something about it, but I don't think it's going to happen before that. So we're actually going to talk.
Would you want to abolish the ATF?
Oh, 100%. Like, I like, what do they do? The reality. They don't do anything.
Eliminate freedom.
Well, listen, let's talk about the one at hand, right? The pistol brace thing's expiring or going into effect on May 31st. The pistol brace rules that allowed, they're saying it's the way around the SBR. The ATF built that. That's their design. Like, there's times, hey, you give like the American redneck like a blueprint. This is the law. They'll figure out a way around it. And I could say, okay, fine. If this was something that, people figured out a way around an existing law to be able to get by something, they created this. They wrote this. And now they want to make millions of Americans felons for having millions of pistol-braced AR-15s and saying it's an SBR. Guess what? Even if it's an SBR, who cares? Like, what's an SBR going to... Like, it's nonsense. Just
repeal the NFA.
Yeah.
Get rid of the ATF. Don't need them.
100%. Like,
but that's a big undertaking with Congress.
No, of course. Well, that's the problem, right? People are like, why didn't Trump do something with, the Hearing Protection Act, right? Because Congress didn't put it on his desk. Like, they weren't, the president doesn't unilaterally make laws. That's not how it works in reality.
There was the bump stock ban.
Yes.
And then I think he said, what Luke is always ragging on this, said something about, I like to take them first and then legislate afterwards or something like that.
Yeah, I did. I wasn't a fan of the bump stock ban. Listen, I have dozens of guns. Like, a lot more than that.
But
I can't even say the number.
Recently anyway, I think.
I don't know that it did.
Yeah, I think the federal court ruled it unconstitutional or something.
Probably because it's an accessory or whatever. Yeah. Like, the whole thing. Listen, but the pistol brace thing's a lot different in my mind, in the sense that it's literally ruled on by the ATF. Like, they created this law. Now they're going to make people spend millions of dollars to fix millions of firearms or you're a felon. And again, I don't like the back way and sort of way of registering it. Now, do I register them? I probably have to. For me, I'm not recommending it to others, but I know that someone's going to see me with a gun, or they know that I have dozens of guns.
You have a different target on your back.
You are so under the microscope,
I'm not going to get the Hunter Biden treatment that if I have, and again, it's not like I don't have plenty of ARs that aren't registered, that aren't SBRs or aren't pistol braced. So it's like, it's fine, but I hate it in principle, but I know that, like, there's a solid chance if there's ever a, hey, I'll get a knock on the door, like they used the hostage rescue team to knock on the door of Mar-a-Lago, and if I have one thing that's out of compliance, I'm going to jail, and like I'm not getting a mulligan. I
gotta ask you before we run out of time, because we did ask you this when you called in last time about Julian Assange and a pardon, and you said we got to pardon these guys. So while we have you here, I really this one's particularly important to me, especially to some of my friends. What's currently going on with Julian Assange, I think. None of this should ever happen. The man should be free. I'm curious if you want to elaborate or your thoughts.
Yeah, listen, I think we got into it last time. I don't know if I fully sort of gave you my views on it. Like, and I think if you would have asked me this in 2016, I'd say it's terrible. And same with Snowden. I can't believe they did this. If they put our people in harm's way, And now I'm looking at it, in light of what we found out about Ukraine, and I'm like, wait a minute. Now that I've been a fly on the wall, right? Now that I've been a subject to their witch hunts, or to their, disaster, whatever we want to call whatever just happened. I think it's far worse than a witch hunt, frankly, at this point. I my views have changed entirely. I think there was that time when I had that, well, the American government and the FBI and our CIA, they're doing it in our best interest. No, they're not. At that time, I would have said those guys are, they're a traitor to the country, or they're, now, like the guy that...
After that Time magazine cover,
yeah.
Maybe
after that, I was like, so my views have changed. So I think 100% you have to let them go. I think you need those kind of things to keep us in check. It'd be different if I thought we were functioning as good actors, but we're not. And that's evidenced as recently as 2 weeks ago in Ukraine, when magically a 21-year-old Air Corpsman has all those classified documents about boots on the ground in Ukraine, when we're told explicitly that we don't have. And I have a feeling that whistleblower or that guy is going to go to jail for a very long time. Yep. But he could have stopped World War III as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So again, my sentiments now, knowing what I know, and again, maybe I was wrong years ago, but again, I wanted to believe, right? It's like Santa. You want to believe that it's true when you're a kid, what I mean? Like, I wanted to believe they're doing good things. I wanted to believe, you're putting people in harm's way. It's like, no, you're putting people in harm's way because we have boots on the ground in a war we're not supposed to be in, that you're telling us we're not in, that we're funding unilaterally against the world's largest by volume nuclear superpower. Like, that's a problem. And, again, that one disappeared really quickly, which means there's probably other incriminating evidence that, all of a sudden we don't hear about this one. So, my views have changed. Like, a lot of my political views now, frankly, have changed, having been in the room. Yeah. And seen...
Been the target,
been in the room. And so, that would be a big one for me. Do I ever want to put our people in the field in harm's way? 100% no. You know what I mean? I think there's reason, that has to be had here. But, like, if we're acting as bad, like we've lost the moral high ground on a lot of stuff that I thought we were able to have, and it's because these guys are telling us what we're actually doing, and that's important.
I'll tell you my view on this. I'm not convinced as much on Edward Snowden. I'd probably be like, okay, fine, let him come home. Julian Assange, very different. Edward Snowden gets documents working internally and then leaks them. People call him a whistleblower.
No, exactly.
But what he did was he had a big trove of documents that he did not review and gave them out.
Yeah.
There was a lot of important information revealed by doing that, which I think is good. We saw that they were lying to Congress. They were spying on us. But there's a big difference between leaking, whistleblowing, and journalism.
Correct.
Julian Assange received materials from whistleblowers and then reported on it. And they actually would redact and they would make phone calls. He would contact the State Department and say, hey, we received these materials. We want to make sure nobody's put in harm's way. And then they drummed up all these insane lies to try and destroy him because he was effective. So it's like people come to me about Edward Snowden. I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. But Julian Assange, this guy was...
Assange is obviously the no-brainer in that. But yeah, listen, you see it every day, right? They disbanded the group at the IRS that was investigating Hunter Biden and the tax fraud. It's like, you took it over by like Joe Biden's DOJ took that over because they had a whistleblower. I remember when whistleblowers were above reproach. Like they, look at what they did. Alexander Vindman, he's a great American hero. He, maybe, offered the job to Ukrainian defense minister and who the hell knows what it, grifting off of that. But like, he was a great hero because it was against Trump. And so that, again, the way these things are applied, the way the rules are, the way people are protected as whistleblowers or thrown under the bus as whistleblowers, we live in two very different worlds. And I'd like to see actually just some, equal treatment of those people.
I agree. We're gonna move to the members only uncensored show. So head over to timcast.com, click join us. We'll try to have it live ASAP. So go to, again, timcast.com, in the menu bar, join us, and it'll be on the front page in a few minutes. Smash the like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. You can follow the show at Timcast IRL. You can follow me personally at Timcast. Do you want to shout anything out, Don Jr.?
Listen, I guess just if you like what I'm saying, check me out on my Rumble podcast on Mondays and Thursdays at 6 p.m., conflicting a little bit with our friend over here. But, there's always time to watch both.
We'll just have to cross-stream at some point,
Yeah.
See? Talking about shameless plugs, working my way in there.
Maybe we have to do that. We'll have to make that happen.
Right on.
Seamus Coughlin, not the only person giving plugs anymore. Feels good. I have a YouTube channel called Freedom Tunes. We're going to be uploading a cartoon tomorrow that I think you guys are really going to enjoy. This is one about the fact that men have periods now. I don't know if you've heard of this.
I've heard that's
true.
Science.
Yes, it is science. And if you deny that, you're a science denier.
A science denier.
Why would you guys want those? I just don't understand.
Because, look, all I'm saying is what Democrats have literally done, by definition, what the left has done here, because trans women, I'm told, menstruate, and because trans men still menstruate, they have increased the number of people in the world PMSing. That's what they've done. That's all they've done. So check that cartoon out. It's coming out tomorrow. And also on Rumble, I have a stream called Shamer. Thank you very much.
I'm Hannah Claire Brimlow. When you're not watching either one of these two gentlemen's podcasts, you should go to timcast.com, click on the read tab. You can see the work from me and all of our other journalists, including Chris Bertman, Cassandra McDonald, Adrian Norman. You can follow at Timcast News on Twitter and Instagram. It's the best. Do it immediately. If you want to follow me personally, you can find me on Instagram at hannahclaire.b and on Twitter at HCBrimlow. Thanks so much.
I wouldn't cross streams. That's like the first rule. Wow. Just to
nice
call you
little
guys
Ghostbusters reference. I like that. The old school.
Yeah, I gotta call you guys out. But beyond that, fun show. Glad we're going to the members only in a second here. Thanks for watching, y'all. I'm Serge.com on Twitter. Please follow me.
So I can misbehave a little bit more now.
Yeah. Yes. We will see you all over at timcast.com in a few minutes. Thanks for hanging out.